We are live. We are ready. Okay, so we are currently streaming, as always, on Twitch and YouTube right now simultaneously. Let me set up the camera here for you guys. All right, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. It is time for our season 4 finale of The Last Drive-In. Let me switch over to the live feed here, so that way anybody watching on Twitch can see what's going on as well. Okay, as I said, tonight, our season finale of Season 4, The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. Tonight, we are doing the 3-episode send-off. It is going to be episode 15, 16, and 17. And it is also September 1st. So we are just about ready to get into spooky season. It's already spooky season for me. Fuck you talking about. It's already spooky season for me, but spooky season is around the corner for most people now, ladies and gentlemen. September 1st is here. It is now. It is happening. So, tonight the movies that Joe Bob is going to be talking about and reviewing are Episode 15, Street Trash. Episode 16, I believe, is Blood Harvest. And then episode 17 is Prom Night 2. So those are the episodes scheduled for tonight. I don't want to do too much yapping because we have a lot to get through. I enjoy everybody being here with me. Thank you so much for spending your September 1st night with me. Do you remember? It is finally here, ladies and gentlemen, September. Spooky season is around the corner. So with all of that being said, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves, this is going to be the season finale of Season 4 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. Episodes 15, 16, and 17. Street Trash, Blood Harvest, and Prom Night 2. Let's get right into it. Also, I hope you guys got some snacks. I hope you got a little drink to sip on. You know, we're sipping on one of my favorites, the Arnold Palmer. The half and half, ladies and gentlemen, Arnold Palmer, iced tea and lemonade. One of my absolute favorites. That is the drink of choice for tonight. We got the Arnold Palmer. And also, I got a little bag of snacks here with me. We got some of these Trolley Sour Bite Crawlers. Some of the Sour Crawlers, Trolley. Okay, so just a little bit of snacks, little bit of iced tea and lemonade. We are ready for the season finale of Season 4 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob.
Oh, hell. You know, every once in a while on The Last Drive-In, we like to feature a movie where the entire cast looks like they just crawled up out of a sewer full of raw meat that's been left out in the sun for 14 days. And that night is tonight, and the movie I speak of is the notorious Street Trash from the 80s. And one thing that you may not know is that both of our movies tonight, The Stuff and Street Trash, come from a horror subgenre called melt movies. Have you heard of this? It's basically any movie where actors get squashed, squeezed, vaporized, or as the name implies, melted into goo piles. And we saw it with Garrett Morris in The Stuff. And what the holy heck, let's see it 97 or 98 more times tonight, all right? Yeah. I want to remind you that Darcy the Mail Girl is still standing by to field all your emails, your tweets, your instant messages, your texts. Give us your cell number, Darcy, so they can text. No? No? All right. Okay. And since every scene in the movie we're about to watch is going to make you feel like sleaze is dripping out of your TV set and making your shoes stick to the floor, this might be a time to talk about how you're going to keep your instrument clean. And you know how actors say that? My instrument. You know, I take care of my instrument. It's always sounded kind of dirty to me. And they mean their body. Of course, you don't have to worry about that, Darcy, because You girls have got those Gwyneth Paltrow chemicals to work with. You got iguana juice to rub on your sternum or whatever. In fact, I thought this might be a good time to talk about the Joe Bob Wellness Regimen, because I get several hundred emails a week, people asking me about it, because people want to know, how do you do it, Joe Bob? Glowing skin after a 3-day drunk. Toned abs over your beer gut. You know, a certain aroma about your torso that prevails even after extended sessions in the cigar bars of Jersey City. And that hint of pink bog detritus in your breath every time you return from either Scotland or Vinny's package store in Coney Island. And I am truly humbled by all the attention. And so in the interest of public health and a vigorous America, glistening like Vin Diesel's deltoids after being oiled up by a team of Swedish strippers, I'm happy to take you through my wellness day. I always try to rise each morning by 9:45 because this creates the mental confidence caused by not sleeping until 10 o'clock, while also creating that 15-minute window to remove the previous day's clothing and aim a garden hose directly at the eyeballs, thereby removing any blood in the iris. Now, it helps to prepare for this morning ritual by coating the face with raw bee pollen coated with silk gum, because this will cause you to throw up immediately instead of waiting until later in the day. Now, a little after 10, I step into a clawfoot bathtub with a polyethylene mat positioned to avoid pratfalls, whereupon I fumble through several bottles of essential body oils containing cocoa butter, hydrating tangerines, radiant lavender, jojoba.
This dialogue is reminding me a lot of Christian Bale in American Psycho, how he just describes like his morning routine and shit. Like, the dialogue here from Joe Bob is very spot on. You're definitely getting the health regimen. You're getting to see how Joe Bob takes care of himself here. It's all about how you take care of yourselves, ladies and gentlemen.
And sunflower. All those were left in my apartment by a gay guy, and I throw all that stuff out so I can find a bar of lye soap made from leftover cooking fat, and I scrub that son of a bitch over everything except my dangling participles, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. Thus invigorated, with blotchy red perforations all over my body, I take a sliced pineapple, a handful of minced fresh parsley, 3 egg whites, 1 cup of spinach, 2 tablespoons of organic ground flaxseed, some dried black currants, and I pour all of that into a blender that has been prepped with 2 cups of 130 proof Booker's bourbon. I now have my vegetables for the day. By the way, I've shared this recipe with women who practice vagina sunbathing, and we know it works for them, but I can attest that it is equally effective when used indoors on a rainy Tuesday by a heterosexual male with a non-tanned Woody. You think I'm lying about that, don't you? Now it's time for a little mid-morning mood shift using Kundalini meditation. For those of you unfamiliar with Kundalini, it's a type of consciousness raising in which a coiled female serpent takes up residence at the base of the spine. Now, to simplify my life, I use a nude Latina masseuse named Luciana who shows up 3 times a week at 11:45 and coils her entire body at the base of my spine. And
Joe Bob got the Latina mommies coming through, giving him a masseuse. Get yourself a Latina mommy masseuse, chat. I know I need one.
Then proceeds to Kunda Mylini. And now let the work day begin. So to make sure my memory and cognition are at peak levels, I take fish oil, cocoa flavanols, and turmeric. These are the supplements needed in order to remember how to spell turmeric. And then I take choline to avoid early onset Alzheimer's. Although early onset Alzheimer's is an ironclad defense of libel suits and slander suits, so I kind of go easy on that. By lunchtime, I'm feeling the effects of the previous evening's 2 a.m. pork burrito, so I do a probiotic cleanse of maple syrup, cayenne pepper, and organic kiwi juice, followed by a light lunch of sugar-cured ham slabs on a cinnamon bun that's been sliced lengthwise and soaked in salted Belgian cream. I wash that down with a can of Lithuanian energy tonic, which has 2,000 milligrams of caffeine, and you're ready to conquer the afternoon work schedule. But first, nap time. You know, one of the most common mistakes when structuring a holistic physiological regimen designed to produce homeostasis in the chakras is the absence of a sleep plan. So all you need is 20 minutes of deep REM oblivion around 2:30, and my preferred method, have a Watusi girl rub my temples after 2 shots of Duplay Swiss absinthe, chased with an Ocean Spray cranberry mixer. The resulting quick sink into dreamland has been compared to shamanistic practices in the Peruvian Amazon, in which masticated jungle vines are used to induce visions of jaguars eating your brain. You awaken terrified but rested, as though your medulla oblongata has been massaged with a squeegee. We are now entering the most productive part of the day. To enhance your mood, don't be afraid to pamper yourself with soy candle aromatherapy, a detoxifying pink grapefruit body wash, a quick cruelty-free cactus bristle exfoliation brush, or you can just do what I do, scratch your balls and yawn. The important thing here is that this is me time. It's your own personal island of id-caressing luxury. Now, dinner depends on whether you're dieting or not. Women should probably eat clay, either roasted clay or raw clay. Men should stick to the finer brands of both Boer sausage and goat sausage, preferably dipped in lard. Everything should be accompanied by stevia and cordyceps. Unless, like me, you don't know how to pronounce cordyceps or you're not sure about it, so you have some skepticism about ingesting parasites. Reishi mushrooms are de rigueur, but only in countries where they have douches who say the words de rigueur. And shilajit should be included as a side dish if one of your nutrition goals is to be full of shilajit. Use a little barrenwort for a presentation, and, hey, we can't live forever. Pour some of that smoky Islay scotch. Actually, pour a lot of smoky Islay scotch. In fact, coat the entire plate with smoky Islay scotch and then throw out the plate and drink the scotch. Now, before you go out for the evening, don't forget a little slow motion Tai Chi to frighten the neighborhood children, and then follow that up with an electronic mixtape with a dropout bass line that will give you the illusion of being at a rave. Viola! You've gotten your daily ration of exercise, and the night is still young. Now, here's the great thing about the Joe Bob Briggs Wellness Regimen. Throughout the day, your body has been transmutating. You are now eligible for the Vampire Fetish Ball without needing a costume. But have fun when you're there, but remember, some of those girls aren't girls, and some of those guys are both. You can have a threesome with one at those things. So wear a cup, because you got to be up by 9:45. And speaking of mutating flesh, the plot of Street Trash is that a bad batch of 60-year-old wine from Tenafly, New Jersey, called Viper, is distributed among hobos living in an auto salvage yard along that nasty creek that separates Brooklyn from Queens, and one by one they explode in psychedelic colors while trying to rob and rape one another. Sure, we've seen it before, but have we seen it with a 3.5-minute football game using a severed penis as a football? I think not. We have 18 dead bodies, 8 breasts, 3 chases, 1 motor vehicle crash, 1 gang rape, 2 brawls, face farting, face melting, motorist jerking, ankle melting, exploding face, exploding fat guy, throat slitting, postmortem sex, lever to the testicles, penis bowl, foot sawing, multiple full frontal gross out scenes, the old one-legged crutch robber trick, strangulation, grocery store destruction, aardvarkus interruptus, sidewalk head bashing, muffler clubbing, cop choking, groin kicking, purple intestine goo, crippled hobo flushing, wheelchair-bound character actor abuse, windshield wiper ripping, rocket canister head removal, gratuitous wastewater treatment plant, gratuitous non-flashbacks with cannibalism, heads roll, hands roll, foot rolls, penis flies, garbage truck foo, squeegee foo, toilet foo, grenade foo, postal cylinder mailer foo. Drive-In Academy Award nominations for Vic Noto as the psychotic nom-vet with a knife made out of femur bones. Mike Blackie as the homeless guy in a floppy purple velvet hat who screams, "Don't drip on me, Ed. Don't drip on me, man." Mark Sferaza as the little brother who lives in fear of being humped by dogs. Jane Arakawa as the Asian babe secretary who has to chew her way out of compromised situations. R.L. Ryan as the obese necrophiliac junkyard owner. Clarence Jarman as Bert, the conniving shoplifter. Bill Chappell as the undercover cop working homeless crime duty. Morty Storm as the black suit who turns to yellow goop. Nicole Potter as the psycho's psycho girlfriend who gets slapped around for back talk before becoming a yellow-green art project. Roy Frumkes, the writer, producer, and the businessman who gets plastered with toxic yellow goop before becoming a steamy stain on the sidewalk. And Jim Murrow, the director, for never letting the story get in the way of the plot. 2 stars. Joe Bob says, check it out.
2 stars for Street Trash.
This may be the only movie ever made where after you watch it, you do need a shower. I mean, you really feel like your skin has turned to goo, and at any moment your head could start pulsating and yellow glopola could start seeping out of your ears. You could show this movie to serial killers who like to chop up bodies and feed them to rabid wolves, and they'd go, that's disgusting. Sure, I eat human toes, but there's a limit, man.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. This is episode 15 of the season finale of season 4, The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. And episode 15 is the movie Street Trash. First segment break, 24 minutes.
And so the businessman, minding his own business on the street, gets yellow-gooped from the dying hobo on the fire escape and becomes a steaming statistic in the New York City of 1987. The movie was actually filmed in 1984. And the only reason I mention that guy is that the businessman is played by Roy Frumpkus, a film professor at the School of Visual Arts, which is on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. It's where you go to film school if you can't afford to go to NYU. And you know, sometimes this movie seems like a sophomore film school project. And, oh, I forgot. It is a sophomore film school project. What happened is that Roy was teaching at SVA. I have a slight acquaintance with Roy. He used to have me on his radio show that he would tape in his apartment on the Upper East Side. But Roy was teaching film at the School of Visual Arts, and he had all these students who wanted to go to Hollywood and work in film. And Roy had been around long enough to know that, no, you're not going to Hollywood. You're not going to get hired in California. All the jobs are in indie film, so I'm going to teach you how to do indie film. And so Roy was always raising money to make indie films, mostly so he could show his students how it was done. And the first one he made is fairly famous among horror hounds. It's called Document of the Dead. He followed George Romero around on the set when he was making Dawn of the Dead. And the movie was like 3 years in the making. And it mostly just sat on a shelf. Roy would show it to his class. And then eventually word leaked out about it and people wanted to see it, and it had an actual theatrical release. Now, let me give you an idea of how Roy thinks, though. His first idea was to make a documentary about the filmmaking style of Earl Owensby, the one-man filmmaker in Shelby, North Carolina. Earl would make movies starring himself, movies you've never heard of, like Hit the Road Running, Dogs of Hell, Buckstone County Prison, and then he would sell those directly onto the drive-in circuit. But then George Romero said, well, you can come onto my set, Roy. And so Roy switched over to Romero. So Earl Owensby, George Romero, same difference to Roy. Anyway, today there are umpteen jillion making of films, and it seems like every movie has a behind-the-scenes movie that goes with it. But at the time, Document of the Dead was one of a kind. So anyhow, Roy was looking to make another film. And one of the sophomores made a short film called Street Trash, using many of the same characters that you just saw. And that student was Jim Murrow. And Jim Murrow inherited some money from an uncle. And he went to Roy and he said, you know, I have this money. I want to expand my short into a feature, but I can't write. Will you help me write it? Because the short film had no story. It was just a series of shock effects. And I know what you're thinking. Well, Joe Bob, this one also has no story. I'll address that in a minute. But let me finish. And Roy said, yeah, I'll help you write it, but also let's raise some money so you can do it right. And so Roy raised $850,000 from various investors. But the interesting part of the story is what Jim Murrow did with the inheritance from his uncle. He bought a Steadicam. Now, this was in the very early days of the Steadicam, and you'll notice that this movie is hectic. It moves. And that's because the main reason Jim Murrow wanted to make it is so he could work out with the Steadicam. So like that extended foot chase under the opening titles, that's some pretty awesome work for a low-budget indie flick, not to mention the scene where the crippled guy flushes himself down the toilet. I mean, that's not a Steadicam scene, but it took 4 guys just pumping the blood and goo to get those special effects. So Roy Frumpkus wrote the script for the picture, and as you may have noticed, it doesn't make a lick of sense, but it does evoke the world of the homeless. Probably the least sympathetic view of the homeless ever put on film, and is shot mostly in a junkyard and an auto salvage yard located right there by the Pulaski Bridge. It's the border between Brooklyn and Queens. It's one of the most desolate parts of New York City in the 80s. And the reason they shot there, Jim Murrow's parents owned that wrecking yard. I always ask the question, whatever happened to Jim Murrow? Why didn't he make more movies? And the answer is that he became so good with that Steadicam that he became the highest paid camera operator in Hollywood. He does all of James Cameron's movies. He was a Steadicam operator on Crash, Titanic, Runaway Bride, LA Confidential, Heat, Casino, Clueless, True Lies, The Getaway, A Few Good Men, JFK, Terminator 2, Dances with Wolves, The Abyss, Field of Dreams, okay, right? Plus a few movies this crowd is familiar with, like Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. We were just talking about Jason Takes Manhattan yesterday. Friday the 13th, Part 8. One of my favorite Friday the 13th movies again. I love Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Jason X, the one where Voorhees is in space. Yes, I am a Jason X fan. Fucking Friday the 13th, Part 4. Friday the 13th, Part 5. Freddy vs. Jason, one of my all-time favorite horror movies, if not my favorite horror movie, Freddy.
And the immortal maniac cop. So he didn't have time to make more movies. He was becoming a millionaire Steadicam operator and a born-again Christian, which might explain why he tends to distance himself from this movie today. All right, that's way too much information for the first break. So, back to the movie. And oh, no, I forgot to talk about the squeegee guys. That scene where people get stopped at the red light at the triple intersection and the squeegee guys swarm all over their cars, that really was a place where that would happen, the corner of Moultrie, Humboldt, and Norman in the Greenpoint neighborhood. And that was during the years when any place you got stopped in traffic where there was a long red, these guys would jump out on you and start cleaning your windshield. And they weren't really cleaning it, they're just kind of slopping water on it and rubbing a gross, dirty rag across it for 10 seconds until you gave them $1 to make them leave. But fortunately, Mayor Rudy Giuliani made it one of the cornerstones of his reign as mayor to get rid of the squeegee guys. And so he ordered the NYPD to start picking them up and putting them in jail. I'm not sure what the charges were. Unlawful windshield maintenance, assault with a dirty rag. But they basically trumped up charges on these homeless guys to make the terror stop. I'm not sure why that bothered people so much, but to guys like Rudy Giuliani, it was worth millions to get those guys to stop windshields for $1. I can tell you why it worked as a scam, though, because it's basic street con psychology. You give the mark something for nothing. And if he's streetwise, he just doesn't give a crap. If he's a tourist, he thinks, oh my God, I'm obligated. And then you just stare at him till he coughs it up. Now, you wouldn't think that would work, but it works. It's some kind of rich guy guilt thing where you actually know the guy is robbing you, and yet you're encouraging him to rob you more. You're really paying the person to leave, to get out of your space. You can't run away because the light is red. So you're taking the express lane to getting the stinky guy out of your field of vision. And people thought that was worth $1. But Rudy Giuliani suppressed the market for squeegee guys. He eliminated that source of income for thousands of stinky guys.
Next break for the movie Street Trash. 34 minutes, about 10 minutes after the first one.
So, of course, Bert walks through a plate glass window with a paper bag over his head. Now the whole sequence makes sense to me. What do you think you're doing with all that chicken in your pants? Don't write them like that anymore. I think I want a shirt with that quote on it. This part of the movie is just about all the plot we're going to get. Bronson is the tough guy, Vietnam veteran, king of the junkyard, and so I guess part of that role is to make your dirt-stained woman perform sex acts on you while your troops look on. The Asian girl who has a relationship with Freddy's kid brother seems like a flashback waiting to happen. No apparent reason for Bert being in the movie at all. Most of the actors in this movie, you will be shocked, absolutely shocked to find out, had no acting experience. The lead is Mike Lackey as Freddy. This is his only role. He would go on to be a comic book writer. He actually works on Spider-Man. Bill Chappell as the cop was a real NYPD cop who worked the Times Square precinct for 16 years, back when Times Square had 2 homicides a week. Vic Noto as the deranged G.I. Bronson He's a Sicilian Irish native of Brooklyn from a military family and actually was in the Navy.
Hey, Sicilian and Irish. Italian and Irish, ladies and gentlemen, just like your boy. All right, down here in Buffalo, New York. Irish and Italian, there we go.
Now, the way he describes his job in the Navy is that he was an aerial photographic intelligence man and Navy diver in the Naval Air Fleet aboard a patrol squadron in the elite U.S. Navy Hunter-Killer Combat Aircrew Division. All those words are the name of his job title in the Navy, even though there is no such organization in the U.S. Navy, at least not by that name. But Vic is a lifeguard, a competitive swimmer, a diver, has a brown belt in karate, rides a Harley, but is mostly just a hermit now and a misanthrope who writes angry screeds about society all the time on the internet. He's one of those perennially pissed off people in real life who doesn't trust anybody. Here's one example of his work. Show me a lawyer who isn't arrogant, and I'll show you a buffalo who can use a pay toilet. I want a shirt that has that written on it, too. Vic was hired 12 hours before the start of principal photography because they had to fire the previous guy. And so he never read the script. He never knew exactly who the character was. He just went scene by scene. How shocking. I'm so surprised. Mark Sferrazza as Kevin, the little brother, his only role. Jane Arakawa as Wendy, her only movie. Nicole Potter as Wynette, the abused girlfriend of Bronson, her first movie, no other credits to speak of. Pat Ryan as Frank Schneiser, the fat guy. He actually made 9 movies in the 80s, almost all of them for Troma Films. He was the mayor in The Toxic Avenger, the nuclear power plant manager in Class of Nukem High. He was the lead cannibal alien in the sci-fi comedy Eat and Run. Sadly, he died of a heart attack in 1991. Bernard Perlman as Wizzy, his only role. Clarence Jarman as Bert, the shoplifter who stuffs chicken down his pants. That's his only role. Such a galaxy of unfulfilled acting promise. All right, back to the movie. Remember the tagline on the poster? Prepare for a molten hobo holocaust. Who could resist that line? Molten hobos, you know? Hey, I've got an idea for a story. We need to save money, right? Let's burn up some hobos. Let's fry some homeless guys. Hobos are cheap, man.
Next segment break for Street Trash is at 51 minutes.
So yeah, as all the homeless bums in the junkyard carry the bimbo girlfriend of the mob boss who doesn't know where she is because she's too drunk into wherever you take a drunk woman in a junkyard, my question is, why is one of the would-be rapists carrying a pickaxe? There's kinky, there's gross, there's disgusting, there's torture porn, and then there's street trash, which treats all of the above as comedy. Miriam Zucker is the actress who played the drunken wench. That's her actual credit on the movie. And Drunken Wench was a strange choice for her first film role, since a few years before this, she had been attacked in real life by a gang of thugs in a subway station, leaving a scar on her scalp. And she said she had flashbacks of that experience while they were filming these rape scenes. Such a surprise. You know why people like this movie, though? Because it takes place in New York City during its worst period, when the subways were full of graffiti, drug lords had taken over entire neighborhoods, and there were well over 2,000 homicides per year. And it goes one step further to create an image of New York's poor as basically criminals and madmen who run wild like feral scavenging animals. So the rest of the country loved thinking of New York as this epic wasteland where anybody can die at any moment just by walking down the wrong street. The year this movie was filmed was actually the year of Bernie Getz, the subway vigilante, the guy who shot 4 teenagers from the Bronx after they surrounded him on a subway car and told him to give them $5. Bernie shot all 4 of them, jumped off the train, escaped through the Chambers Street subway tunnel.
That actually sounds a lot like the scene from Joker recently with Joaquin Phoenix, where he's just, him and the girl are kind of getting messed with on the subway train, and then it leads to him basically creating a murder scene and then trying to flee from that, escaping, until he basically gives himself up and he admits that he did kill those guys. But that's what that scene reminds me a lot of right there is the movie Joker. And Joker, it actually is supposed to take place during, those kind of worst times. It is a version of Gotham, but really it's a depiction of like New York City around those like worst times of its corruption and just murder and just chaos, right?
Stayed on the run for a week and a half, and then he turned himself in and faced trial for 4 attempted murders and was found innocent of all charges. He even told police exactly how he fired his weapon, making sure that he got all 4 of them, and he became the hero of New York City. That's what the place was like in the 80s and well into the 90s, until Rudy Giuliani got rid of those squeegee guys and those turnstile jumpers. All right, back to the movie. Turnstile jumping is, remember they do that in the Warriors? We know the Warriors are a tough gang because they never pay for the subway. They just jump over that turnstile. That was the most controversial part of that movie. Hey, they can't do that. There were murders in the movie, but nobody cared about the murders. Turnstile jumping. Hey, buddy, pay your 60 cents like everybody else, Rudy Giuliani cracked down on those damn teenagers jumping those turnstiles. He also cleaned up Times Square, which is where you went to watch the Warriors, so that it can become the international theme park that it is today. I was the only guy who kept writing articles, please don't clean up Times Square anymore. That's enough cleaning up of Times Square. That's where all the great exploitation movie theaters are. Guys in New York would call me up, journalists, and say, are you that guy who thinks these sleaze theaters ought to be left alone?
Ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. I do apologize for the technical difficulties. Just some technical issues right there with the phone. Had to get it fixed. And now it appears that we are back streaming live on YouTube and Twitch, as always. So, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. This is the season finale of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Season 4. This is episode 15. Joe Bob talking about the movie Street Trash, and he just gave us a little bit more of a description on classic New York City. That classic New York City in the 80s, early 90s. Sleazy, grimy, dirty. That's the way I like my New York City. But we are now back. I apologize for the technical issues. Looks like the stream is back and going. Next segment break here at 1 hour and 2 minutes.
That was Frank Farrell, one of the producers of Street Trash, as the dickless victim. And I think we only have one choice at this point. We have to call up Felissa Rose, the official Last Drive-In mangled dick expert, star of Sleepaway Camp, and get her analysis of what we just saw. Hello?
Hey, Joe Bob. They told me you'd probably be calling.
Felissa, dismembered penis football. The Lorena Bobbitt Bowl.
I've been watching with you, Joe Bob, so yes, I saw the scene.
Now, don't you think this is a little degrading to the Wangdoodle?
No, not if you consider the alternative.
What's the alternative?
That he never gets his dick back and it just withers away in a dumpster.
So you think the hospital is going to be able to reattach it after it's been used in a game of touch football keep away?
Joe Bob, they have some of the best dick specialists in the world in Brooklyn.
Oh, that's right. You're from Brooklyn.
Yes, and we never let dick go to waste.
All right, well, I'll take your word for it. Did you laugh at that scene?
I thought it was hysterical.
I think it's more hysterical for women than for men.
Felissa Rose, star of Sleepaway Camp, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York.
You think?
Oh, God. Men are too attached to their penises. Okay, that's why it's funny.
All right, thanks for that analysis, Felissa. As usual, you have a neutral perspective on a troublesome part of 80s exploitation culture.
I don't know what the fuck you just said, but anytime, Joe Bob.
Okay.
Bye.
Back to the movie. Do people get that Lorena Bobbitt reference when I said Lorena Bobbitt Bowl? That case actually proves that Frank Farrell probably did get his dick working again. Because if you'll recall, Lorena Bobbitt cut off her husband's penis with a kitchen knife while he was sleeping, and then she drove around in the car with it, and then she threw it out in a field, and then they had to go search for it. And then they had a 9.5-hour surgery to reattach it. And then John Bobbitt went on to make porn. I mean, that's amazing medical science. And he had a band called The Severed Parts. This is all going to get rehashed later this year when Jordan Peele's new series comes out. It's called Lorena. I think it'll be pretty much the last word on penis hacking. Jordan talks penis. People listen.
Next segment break, an hour and 27.
Sarah becomes a yellow and green arc, like one of those machines at the state fair where you squeeze the different colors of paint out of a plastic ketchup bottle and then the paper spins around and turns it into an elementary school Jackson Pollock painting. You know what I'm talking about? It's very amusing if you're 10 years old. I like the way every dead homeless person reads a different color of intestine goo. It's the Hobo Rainbow Coalition, diversity and inclusion in the homeless jungle. This part we just watched was all over the lot. Well, I guess the whole movie is all over the lot. But I wanted to point out 6 things that you probably never saw in cinema before and might never again see. I want to show you just how original this movie is. In this one sequence that we just watched, we have 6 cinematic moments that will live forever as unique. One is a cop pulling a bulimia throat trick in order to intentionally throw up on a suspect. The second scene is the exchange between the necrophiliac rapist fat dude and the cop, where they say there were many layers of semen inside the body, as though male sperm won't mix with other male sperm. They're just striations in there, like rings on a tree that tell its age. And then the punchline of that exchange is, the third from the last guy had syphilis. Now, remember, this is 1984, before DNA testing existed. And so this is Roy Frumkus just making up some Fantasyland idea of how rape kits work. Okay, the third and his little brother Kevin keep clobbering each other with Postal Service mailing cylinders, reminiscent of vicious fights I had with my sisters involving toilet paper tubes. The fourth thing is using a car muffler as a weapon in a fist fight. You're never going to see that again. The fifth thing is the 2 friends meet at the liquor store, and one of them says, for no reason, he says, "Fuck you, here's $1, suck my dick." Followed by, "Here's your booze, suck your own dick, you schmuck." Followed by, "Go fuck your dog, Ed." It just comes out of nowhere. And the 6th thing is a Vietnam flashback in which our favorite psycho, Bronson, saws off the feet of Vietnamese villagers while weeping. All right, I know the suspense is killing you. You're wondering what's going to happen to the protagonist of the movie, except there kind of is no protagonist. And so let's get to the explosive conclusion of street trash. And by the way, the word fuck is used 128 times in this movie. Now, the reason that statistic wasn't in the drive-in totals is that I would have to independently verify that. I mean, some guy on the internet did count the fucks in street trash. And frankly, I'm surprised the number is that low. But before I would put 128 fucks in the drive-in totals, I would...
Hello, LJ. Thank you for your subscription on YouTube. Definitely means a lot to me. Hope you're having a good night. We're out here hanging out. September 1st, spooky season around the corner. We're doing our season finale right now of season 4 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. Joe Bob's talking about the movie Street Trash. This is episode 15, so we still have 2 more episodes left, 16 and 17. But thank you very much for your subscription, and thank you for hanging out. I definitely appreciate that, LJ.
Have to run the movie with a clicker, and I'm not prepared to click fucks. Therefore, we will accept the popular press reporting and grant that there are probably 128 fucks in this movie. So you realize now, at least 30 guys are going back through the movie and counting the fucks, right? See, that's my real plan. We'll know on Twitter sometime this week what the real number is, because 25 of the 30 guys will have the same number, and so we'll know what the real number is. We are now crowdsourcing drive-in total.
an estimated 128 fucks in the movie Street Trash. And this is after the end credits.
So yeah, the last 6 minutes is that scene with Duran the mobster and the doorman. No clue why you want to listen to that. But there it is, and then there's that song. But the real climax of the movie is when Bronson, the nom guy, gets his head blown off with that canister torpedo. Actually, his head and part of his shoulders, too. And then we see the head descending from the stratosphere in the far distance. But his eyes are still moving, and we end with the love clinch between the Vietnamese girl, I'm assuming she's Vietnamese, and the little brother of Freddie. And then the whole audience goes, what the fuck did we just watch? Street Trash did make money, although it made more money in Europe than in the U.S., especially popular in France, for whatever that tells you. I already mentioned earlier that Jim Murrow, the director, went on to be the top Steadicam operator in Hollywood, and you can see how the Steadicam was used in almost every sequence of the film. Now, my question is, how did you get the whole cast to act like over-the-top lunatics? I mean, there is a group acting style to this film, and it's basically screaming and running. The most famous guy to come out of Street Trash was one of the production assistants. Production assistant is pretty much the lowest job you can have on any movie. And that person is Bryan Singer, who would go on to direct The Usual Suspects and all the X-Men films, Superman Returns. Bryan was one of those guys who studied at the School of Visual Arts under Roy Frumkes. And by the way, the liquor store owner who uses a fake name in the credits was also a film professor at School of the Visual Arts. Roy Frumkes has given a lot of interviews about this film over the years, and he says he based his story on the Akira Kurosawa movie Donzoko, which was released in the U.S. as The Lower Depths, which is set in a rundown boarding house in 19th century Japan. So we talked about showing the two movies back to back. You know, which do you prefer, Kurosawa or Frumkes? But we already knew the answer to that, Frumkes, obviously. So let me just read one of the internet reviews of Street Trash, because this kind of explains the fan base for this movie. This movie is cheap, sleazy, vile, disgusting, fluorescent, stinky, slimy, perverse, insane, and retarded, which is why it must be viewed by everyone. You must watch this movie. You know, a certain kind of guy loves this movie, but all women hate this movie. Actually, I wanted to ask you, Darcy, because
Darcy,
what do you think?
the lovely male girl. Round of applause for Darcy.
It's not one of my favorites, but it's kind of a hoot with all those grossed out gags.
Can you be grossed out, though?
Not really. But it's actually really beautifully shot for such a gory, gruesome film.
All right, so not all women hate it, but the woman who plays the dirty junkyard girlfriend, that's her only film role, but she answered a casting notice that Frumkes had posted in an anorexia clinic.
It's gory. It's gruesome. I think it's interesting, too, how a lot of the people who worked on a movie with this style, like, as he said, like, the director for the movie, Roy, actually went on to become a very successful Steadicam operator in Hollywood. And for, I mean, a lot of movies that I've seen, some of you have probably seen, you know, Casino, and there's James Cameron movies up there, Judgment Day 2, Terminator, fucking Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, one of my favorite Friday the 13th movies. It's crazy that a lot of people who started with this kind of film, some of them actually went on to have some successful careers, actually. So you love to see when that happens, because I just love the independent kind of underdog stories like that, where it's like, you make a movie with close to nothing on your budget. You have like little to no money actually in your pockets, in your bank account. Everybody just has a dream. Everybody just wants to create this thing together. And sometimes it can benefit you in the future. And you can actually go and fucking work with James Cameron, or even one of my favorite directors, Martin Scorsese. So there you go.
Question about all the people involved with the movie is, who are these people? You know, School of Visual Arts. I'm gonna stop by there. I bet they throw a mean party at that place.
I will go with you.
And by the way, all those derelict locations in Greenpoint, those are hipster cafes and restaurants and craft beer places. That whole neighborhood is unrecognizable, which is a shame. But anyway, what you got?
This is a letter from Crystal B. of Ohio.
Howdy, Joe Bob. I grew up watching Monster Vision on TNT Network, and it is very close to my heart. It has had a positive influence on me and has helped me make me weird and wonderful. I am now a grown-up and want to share this 90s gold mine with my son. I love the free speech, and I don't give a shit about being PC because you're funny as hell. Your brand of funny is still funny and has lasted decades. I love it when they emphasize the number of decades that I've lasted. I recently watched The Stepfather with my son, and he was hungry for more. He asked me why there weren't shows like this on anymore, and I said, I wish there was too. I really hope Shudder picked it up. This was written before the beginning of our piddly little 9-week series here, but I miss how awesome you are, Joe Bob Briggs. You're still a cult favorite. I sincerely hope to get to watch you again and share you with my son on our regular movie night. Please, Shudder, revive this quirky, weird, and wonderful show. P.S. I also really liked when you read letters from inmates, because they're people too and deserve a little shout out too, and I'm glad you included them. Also loved you poking fun at yourself by reading the occasional insulting letters. Ha ha. I hope you will keep that part of the show. You know, I'm trying. I can't get to the inmates. They have some kind of rule about having a computer in your actual cell. And they also have a rule about subscription services. But what's weird is that in the 90s, almost all the letters were insulting. Are you censoring these letters?
I swear I'm not.
Okay. PPS. My next episode of Monster with my son will probably be The Ice Cream Man. After all, you love the Ice Cream Man. After all, you were the original riff tracks. Also, where the heck do you find all that random background info and all these obscure and awesome films? All right, Crystal. Ice Cream Man is one of Darcy's favorite movies, right?
So is.
It's coming up all the time now. You're going to get Clint Howard to come on the show, right? I asked you before, because I mentioned earlier how you stalked Clint Howard until he agreed to do an interview with you, and now you have his phone number, right? So we can get to Clint Howard through you, right?
I'll bring it up next time we hang.
All right. And Riff Tracks is, that's that thing that our buddies over at MST3K do, right?
Yes. And did you know that Jonah Ray, the host of The Reboot, is a really big fan of yours too?
Jonah Ray has done some nice tweets about us, you know, but that thing they do is they riff on the movie. You can like sync it up with your somehow. I don't quite understand it, but they riff on the movie. They never really like the movie, do they?
I don't know. I think it's done with love.
Well, find me some hate mail though, because that's a lot more fun.
I'll get right on that.
We have a crack research staff who are all hired because they have no friends, no family, and no interest other than vegging on their couch. And most of them sort of soak up sound bites off the TV through osmosis. And once a month, we send in some medical techs to do glucose tests on them and leave them some Richard Simmons VHS workout tapes. And they're pretty happy to be helping out, right?
We all are.
Okay. I have a riddle. Okay? You like riddles?
I do.
Tell me if you can figure this out. You're on a horse, galloping at a constant speed. On your right side is a sharp drop-off. On your left side is an elephant traveling at the same speed as you. Directly in front of you is a galloping kangaroo, and your horse is unable to overtake the galloping kangaroo. Behind you is a lion running at the same speed as you and the kangaroo. What must you do to safely get out of this dangerous situation? Do you know?
No idea.
Get your drunk ass off the merry-go-round.
Answer to the riddle is get your drunk ass off the merry-go-round. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves, we are about to begin with episode 16. I believe the movie is Blood Harvest. We're going to take a quick, brief intermission, about a 1.5, 2 minute break here. And then we will be right back. So grab yourself a drink, get yourself some snacks. And also, thank you to our new subscription here on YouTube from LJ. Appreciate your support. So cheers to LJ. We're sipping on some Arnold Palmer right here, half and half. Iced tea and lemonade. Little Arnold Palmer. Little Arnold Palmer, chat. Arnold Palmer. Iced tea and lemonade. All right. we're going to take a little bit of a break here, 1.5, 2 minute break. So make yourselves comfortable, everybody. And cheers to our new subscription on YouTube from LJ. All right, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, Vampires and werewolves, we are back. My apologies, had to go upstairs real quick, take care of some stuff, had to turn the lights on. We got this, we got a really cool Buffalo Bills neon light. It's one of my favorite lights. I wish you guys could see it. It's not down here in my room, but it's upstairs in our kitchen window. And we also have a season starts. I wish I could get a Buffalo Bandits one. I don't know if they make a Buffalo Bandits one, but that would be really cool. I would like to get a Buffalo Bandits one. Also had to check on the dog, Grizzly Bear. Had to make sure he's okay. Put some autumn ambience on for him now that it's September 1st. Little fireplace with the pumpkins, nothing too fancy, but he seems to enjoy it. So we checked on Grizzly Bear, turned the Buffalo Bills neon light on in the window, and we are just about to get ready here for episode 16 of our season finale. This is season 4 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. Tonight we're doing episodes 15, 16, and 17. This is episode 16, so this movie is going to be Blood Harvest, and I hope you guys enjoy. Salute to the new subscription on YouTube, LJ. Appreciate you hanging out with us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, episode 16, Joe Bob going to talk about the movie Blood Harvest.
I've been thinking about our trailer and the way it used to sway. When the bed springs started squealing high and the roaches ran away. But now you're gone to Memphis in my brand new Chevrolet. Lord, I still feel you when Orkin comes to spray.
All right, chat. We can't play the intro song because YouTube doesn't like when we're supposed to play music that they're not too fond of. So we're going to mute it for now. We'll put the audio back on when the episode starts up. But YouTube has a thing against certain music. Let's go over one of my ideas that I have with you guys. So I would absolutely love it if we eliminated the Buffalo Bison's baseball team from Buffalo, New York. I would absolutely love it if we eliminated the Buffalo Bisons. I want there to be an NBA team in Buffalo again, okay? I want there to be an NBA team out here in Buffalo again. You can call them the Buffalo Braves, Buffalo Bisons, Buffalo whatever the fuck. I just want us to have a basketball team again professionally. Of course, if a lot of you don't know your history, Buffalo used to have the Braves in Buffalo, New York, until they moved to California, became the Clippers. But my idea, okay, stay with me. Have you heard about this? Have you listened to me talk about this? Ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. Let's straighten out our camera here on Twitch a bit too. It seems it's looking a little off on the TV there. There we go. We got that fixed, chat. But my idea is that we eliminate the Buffalo Bisons baseball team. Fuck the Bisons, all right? People out here don't care about them that much. We're the affiliates of the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't even think we have any Toronto Blue Jay fans here in Buffalo, New York. It's more Yankees and Mets, to be honest, because New York teams. But we eliminate the Buffalo Bison Stadium. We move the Buffalo Bandits lacrosse team, who are actually champions here in Buffalo, New York for the lacrosse organization. Most recently, back-to-back champions even. But we take the Bandits, we put them in the Bison Stadium, Bison's Field. We fucking, we make it a lacrosse arena. The first ever outdoor lacrosse arena. The Buffalo Bandits get to have it because they are champions. They are back-to-back champions. They deserve it. The first ever outdoor lacrosse arena. We give it to the Buffalo Bandits, and we create an NBA team in Buffalo, New York. Once again, you can bring back the Buffalo Braves. They can play at the Sabres Arena. It would be absolutely magical. You tell me that we don't have a basketball market down here in Buffalo, New York, and I will prove you wrong. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, eliminate the Buffalo Bisons. Once again, affiliates of the Toronto Blue Jays. Don't think we have that many Toronto Blue Jays fans down here in Buffalo, New York. Most likely Yankees fans and Mets fans. But honestly, the minor league baseball teams just aren't cutting it for me anymore. We got an actual championship team, an actual championship lacrosse back-to-back team. They've won many championships over the year. Only team to actually win a championship in Buffalo, New York. Don't know how much that surprises anybody, but we give them a new state-of-the-art, brand new, remodeled outdoor lacrosse arena at the Bison's Field. They could have it. They could do it. Do with whatever they please with it. And fucking bring back the Buffalo Braves. Put them at the Sabres Arena. Sabres and our new NBA team, the Buffalo Braves, can play at the same arena just up the street from Bison's Field right now. It's called Salem's Field, not Bison's Field, but it is up the street from that location. I'm telling you, chat, it'll work. It would work.
You ever walk into a hotel room in a strange city and get the feeling you've been invited to a sleepover at a 1960s-style love-in staged at the Museum of Modern Art? Have you had that experience yet? You ever search for the coffee maker in the morning and then realize that they don't have space for a coffee maker because it's all taken up by that vintage electric guitar hanging on the wall that plugs into the retro amplifier on the bedside bench? Just in case you want to play a little electric guitar this morning. And I say bedside bench because there's no such thing as a table in your groovy room. They don't believe in tables or drawers or shelves or chairs or closets. No, you're staying in one of those hotels that's so modern they only believe in pegs. And they're good pegs. They're burnished wooden pegs, similar to the ones that you use to hang children's winter coats in a second grade class. And if you're very careful, you can put all your shirts and pants on them. Line them up like specimens pulled out of the assembly line in the Van Heusen factory. You might have to pull the collapsible leather strap table off the wall so you can place it next to the sling back leather chair so that later you can sit 2 inches off the ground laptop like a 5-year-old peering over the edge of the candy counter. But in the meantime, better to get access to that last peg so you don't have to stack your hoodies and sweatshirts on the floor. And it's a beautiful floor, by the way. Looks like the deck of a weekend yacht in the Virgin Islands, all polished hardwood. So cold to the touch that you'll be tiptoeing across it in the morning to avoid clinical frostbite on your way to retrieve your pants on a hook. Of course, you won't need pants while you're in the performance art space known as man attempting to dump water on his body, formerly known as the shower, because the shower features not one but 2 windows, allowing anybody else in the room to gaze through frosted glass at your amusing attempts to lather your private parts while dancing under one of those nickel shower heads that descend from the ceiling like the chandelier at a door or the Sheraton like God intended. But no, Joe Bob. We want you to have the best. We want you to experience how massively cool this hotel is. One time I was staying at one of these hotels, wondering whether I'd rather have a kale salad or kill myself. And I decided that it was time to redeem the guitar pick that they gave me at check-in. The guitar pick is good for an craft vodka that they sell at the lobby bar, which is less a bar than a sort of alcoholic Starbucks without the charm. It was located next to the vinyl room, where you can play Chubby Checkers albums on old record players or indulge in a little recreational foosball while waiting for the cocktail artist to prepare your gin smoothie and offer you a yogurt parfait the yogurt parfait. Please take 2 steps forward and present your torso for the firing squad. A yogurt parfait is not breakfast, okay? Let me repeat that. Dude, parfait is not breakfast. Fortunately, everything in the hotel, actually I'm using the word lobby very loosely here. Actually, I'm using the word hotel very loosely here. Everything in the Google-style beanbag chair playground area is more comfortable than your room, so you'll want to settle into one of the overstuffed lobby chairs with your legs crossed under you, Indian style, so you can balance a Microsoft Surface on your right knee and insert your wireless earplugs and start emailing your digital marketing staff in Boulder, Colorado, or some fuck place while weeping every time an Avicii song comes on. You know, if your cotton dockers aren't creased properly, by the way, you'll need to stop at the ironing station, which is tucked away in an alcove off the room corridor, featuring a wall-sized photo of a tattooed guy named Ian. Doesn't say his name is Ian, but I can tell he's an Ian. And he's in the act of ironing his Rush t-shirt. But since you'll be facing away from Ian, you can just bliss out while staring at the hallway wallpaper featuring disembodied arms arranged in geometric patterns. Next, you can visit the convenient food kiosk, formerly called a refrigerated convenience store display rack, and choose your plastic-wrapped free-range chicken sandwich with stone mustard from fucking Provence. And then you'll want to spend an hour posting selfies while reclining in one of those designer hammocks strung from the walls of random spaces next to floor-to-ceiling windows throughout the building. But sooner or later, you'll need to mosey back towards your sleeping cubicle, which gets really dramatic at dusk when you realize the funky metal light fixtures don't actually give off light. Don't worry, though, because under the bed there's lighting that just blinks on and off intermittently at random as you walk near it. And besides, you won't want to stay long in this knee-high single mattress wooden frame bed equipped with a thin, scratchy gray prison-issue blanket. You know, I have to ask the question, how did we evolve to this point? You know, everything about these hotel rooms indicate they were designed by a masochistic, leather-clad exhibitionist, but possibly just a person who's taken too many classes at the Savannah School of Art and Design. And the subliminal messaging is that we don't need creature comforts. We don't need television. The flat screen features 8 subscription services, none of which I fucking subscribe to, and the remote, no option for changing the channel. No option for changing the channel. Let me repeat that. We don't need desks or chairs or spaces of our own because we're all in this together. We're all brothers and sisters in hip, right? The world is Brooklyn, and that world is good. And we love artisanal craft vodka because it's been distilled 20 until it tastes like water. We only friend non-sweatshop shirt makers on Facebook, and isn't that a cool mashup of a Sinatra standard with the Blue Danube Waltz? Because the important thing is vinyl. Vinyl and hardwood and guys named Ian who iron in their boxers, and showers that show the whole world how we shave our crispy mustaches on our way to the next year's vacation in Belize. Bring me that backless camp chair and my Samsung tablet because I need to write a poem about drafty medieval inns and how life was so much better then because I was on the Isle of Mull and the seagulls there were awesome. And yes, I'll have another yogurt parfait because who says the yogurt parfait is just for breakfast? I'm a wild man. And speaking of twisted vestiges of peace, I'm Joe Bob Briggs, and tonight is the final double feature of the last season, or maybe the first season, of The Last Drive-In on Shudder. And we're going to do something a little bit crazy because whenever we do the final part of anything on The Last Drive-In, we always try to veer off the midway and take a side trip to the freak show, even if we become the freak show in the process. And so I'm going to set this up, and then we're going to watch a movie called Blood Harvest. Now, it's not a very good movie. It has 2 or 3 moments in it. But as horror movies go, even by 80s standards, it's pretty much mindless dreck by a screenwriter and a director who didn't have much idea of how to tell a story. The one thing it has going for it is Tiny Tim. Now, that's why almost exactly 25 years ago, I was instrumental in arranging the world cable premiere of Blood Harvest on the movie channel, back when I was doing a show called Joe Bob's Drive-In Theater. I thought then that a horror movie starring Tiny Tim as a neurotic religious nut in a clown costume, filmed in rural Wisconsin, based loosely on the story of Ed Gein, who was the inspiration for Psycho and Silence of the Lambs and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and many other films, could not fail to attract an audience. I was wrong. We showed the movie twice, and at the end of our experiment, the horror fans stifled a giant yawn and returned to their Wes Craven and their George Romero obsessions. But I'm betting that America has matured in its taste. So tonight, we're going to give it another try, and if this doesn't work, I'll be trying it again 25 years from tonight. But there's more. At the first break, I'll be welcoming to the trailer house Justin Martell, who is Tiny Tim's biographer, the world's foremost expert on the whole life of Tiny Tim. And then later on tonight, we're also going to meet Bucks Burnett, Tiny Tim's former manager and the president of the Tiny Tim International Fan Club. In other words, I've decided it's time we got serious about Tiny and his legacy. If you have any questions, comments, gripes, requests, send them to Darcy the Mail Girl, who is standing by for both movies tonight. The second feature, by the way, is another neglected night, too. And we'll get back to you through the various social media channels. But right now, we're going to start Blood Harvest, which is a by-the-numbers, low-budget programmer filmed at the famous shooting ranch owned by Bill Rebane out in the middle of nowhere, otherwise known as Gleason, Wisconsin. And it stars the nubile Etonia Salacek as a college co-ed who comes home to her childhood farm to find her parents missing and her house covered in graffiti. And so she decides to hang around the homestead waiting for her parents to turn up. Unfortunately for her, the only two people she can talk to are Tiny Tim, who's been spending his life in clown makeup ever since his parents were killed, and Tiny's brother, a whiny stalker who thinks Etonia should be falling in love with him. Let's take a look at those drive-in totals. We have 6 dead bodies, 14 breasts,
14 breasts,
Tiny Tim musical interludes with vibrato, 7 Tiny Tim soliloquies with screeching, 3 Tiny Tim prayers with bizarre non-biblical references, 3 chases, hanging, upside down hanging, baseball bat to the face, multiple throats, dress ripping, gratuitous slaughtered pig, chloroform food, foreclosure food, effigy food, paintball food, steam food. Drive-In Academy Award nominations for Etonia Salacek as the babe, who spends most of the movie in various stages of nakedness. Dean West as the creeper. Tiny Tim as Marvelous Mervo, the deranged wannabe clown. 3 stars. Joe Bob says, check it out.
3 stars for Blood Harvest.
See, people don't remember this, but when Tiny Tim got married to Miss Vicky on The Tonight Show in 1969, 45 million people watched that broadcast. Now, that record for a talk show will never be broken. But 8 years later, Tiny is divorced and he wants to be Lon Chaney. He wants to play cripples and freaks in the movies. That's his goal. But he doesn't get that chance until 1985 while he's working a beer festival for a $1,000 flat fee, and this ultra-low-budget film producer offers him the role of Marvelous Mervo, his first and last trip to the silver screen. Like most decisions that Tiny Tim made, this one turned out to be a train wreck. So this is not just a horror flick, this is drive-in history.
Okay, first segment break for the movie Blood Harvest. 23 minutes. I also, with a 3-star rating, I think Joe Bob just might like this movie a little bit too much. I mean, this is already like his 3rd or 4th attempt at showing this to a horror audience, and he's just hoping for the best. But with 3-star rating, I think Joe Bob might have a little bit of favoritism towards this movie with how many times he's tried to show it to the horror audience. But, could it work out this time on Shudder? Let's find out.
As you'll see as the movie goes on, Marvelous Mervo has quite a few songs and soliloquies and scenes where he's all by himself while speaking, and this is because he was remarkably inept at sharing the stage with another actor. If you'll notice in the scenes we've already witnessed, Tiny Tim stands apart from the others. He's acting alone, as they say in method class. He's acting with his head, acting with his voice. He's pretty much doing everything you're not supposed to do. Of course, he was untrained, so he wouldn't necessarily know that. But on the other hand, he'd been on the stage since he was a teenager. And at this point, he's a 54-year-old man. Apparently, he and his brother in the movie, the character of his brother, were born 30 years apart. Their mom was remarkably fertile. Now, I'm guessing, but I would imagine that Marvelous Mervo was a name invented by Tiny Tim himself, because from the time he was a small boy, he was always renaming himself. His birth name was Herbert Corey, but when he was growing up in the Washington Heights neighborhood of Manhattan, he liked to imitate old 78 records and develop vaudeville acts using different personas. So he let his hair grow long like a hippie 30 years before hippies existed, and he wore pale face paint, and he worked under a series of fake names: Texarkana Tex, Judas K. Foxglove, Emmett Swink, Vernon Castle. Vernon Castle is an especially weird one because that's a real person. He was a famous ballroom dancer along with his wife Irene Castle. He's also a World War I pilot who died in a crash in Fort Worth in 1918. They've actually got a monument over there to Vernon Castle at the precise place where he died. But I digress. So the first regular job Tiny Tim had, he used the name Larry Love, the Singing Canary. That was at Hubert's Museum and Live Flea Circus in Times Square. And then he started playing Greenwich Village clubs and coffee houses under the name Derry Dover. And then he moved on to the stage name Sir Timothy Timms, which eventually became Tiny Tim. Now, you don't have to be a master psychologist to see that a guy who constantly changes his name is trying to be somebody he's not, that he might not be comfortable in his own skin. But why am I talking about it so much? We have with us tonight the world's leading authority on Tiny Tim, the guy who spent several years researching and writing a book called Eternal Troubadour, The Improbable Life of Tiny Tim. Welcome, Justin Martell.
Thank you, Joe Bob. I've always wanted to meet you.
Really? Well,
yes.
You wrote 500 pages on the life of a performer that most Americans think of as a flash in the pan, famous for only one song, Tiptoe Through the Tulips, which he sang in a falsetto voice while playing the ukulele. Obviously, if you spent this kind of time on Tiny Tim, you must think he is a lot more than that.
You know, it's unfortunate that Tiny went down sort of in the annals of popular culture as a, sort of a joke, or as at the very least a novelty entertainer. The idea with the book was to put the focus back on Tiny as a troubadour, in the sense that he was a walking encyclopedia and a storehouse of early American songs, songs from the classic American songbook.
He was a music historian.
Yeah, and before Wikipedia and before the internet, all these songs lived within him. It's estimated that he knew thousands of songs from the late 1800s up to the crooner era of the 30s. And I think that's an overlooked aspect of Tiny Tim, as well as his significance as a performance artist. If you look at entertainment and performers, musicians after Tiny Tim, you can draw the line, I guess, from Kiss to Alice Cooper, even to Lady Gaga today. I think you can make the argument that Tiny Tim is the precedent.
That influenced them.
Yeah.
All right, let's focus specifically on Blood Harvest. What did Tiny Tim think of Blood Harvest?
That's an interesting question, Joe Bob. Why don't you have a look at this clip?
He's too fat. His voice is just a little deep for that part. In other words, they'll spend hours talking about trivia, but then they'll take an obviously white character.
He's going to talk instantly rid into him over.
And maybe nobody knows. You know what really burns my brain? We only do this with roles that don't matter anyway. I can hear this is a horror movie.
Essentially, what they're doing is we review probably from Monster Vision, or even before that. I'm not sure what exact episode they're watching, but it is a Joe Bob episode. It is Joe Bob basically talking about the movie Blood Harvest previously, probably, like I said, on Monster Vision. And this clip that they're showing is Tiny Tim watching the Joe Bob episode, okay? And it's Tiny Tim watching Joe Bob basically critique his movie. And I knew it was definitely them watching Joe Bob when he said, you know what really burns my bacon? because that's usually a Joe Bob reference. But now he's saying that this is a horror movie based on Ed Gein, Blood Harvest itself. And Tiny Tim is actually very fond of Joe Bob's critique. He actually is kind of amused by how much Joe Bob is, talking about the movie here. And even if there are some negative things said about it, it seems like it's going over favorably pretty well with Tiny Tim watching the movie review.
You guys know who Ed Gein was, right? The famous mass murdering maniac from rural Wisconsin who liked to hang bodies up in his barn, dress them like deer, and use various body parts as furniture. It stars the nubile Antonia Salacek, a college co-ed who comes home to her childhood farm where she finds her parents missing and decides to hang around the house waiting for them to turn up. Unfortunately for her, Tiny Tim is the only person around she can talk to. He's the neighbor who has worn clown makeup ever since his parents were killed. Dean West is also in the episode, whiny ex-boyfriend.
He even gave it 3 stars back then. Joe Bob has to have something. He's got to have something going for this movie. He's given Blood Harvest 3 stars probably around every single review for the movie. And Tiny Tim seems to be pretty amused by the review also from Joe Bob. So it looks like Joe Bob is a fan with Tiny Tim after he reviewed this movie.
3 out of 4 stars.
Cable premiere right here on the movie channel. Check it out. You know, I hear that the eccentric neighbor in this movie was actually written as a black guy. But the director said, well, what if it was a tall, skinny white guy with a ukulele wearing clown makeup? He would have the same emotional reality.
And there you go. So it tells you the whole thing here. Believe me, Ted, this is a big thing. This movie's a big hit.
Well, I heard no one called, not one person called. It was after this movie was out. Here he is.
Here we are.
Oh man. Wow. I think Tiny Tim just laughed at one of my jokes. Tiny Tim watching Tiny Tim?
We dug deep for that one.
Oh, wow. Where was this filmed?
So this was actually filmed in April of 1994 at one of Tiny's friend's house. His name is Jim Foley, and the clip was provided by Ben Roth, who was there that night. And it was Tiny and a group of his friends. They got together to celebrate Tiny's 62nd birthday. So that was April of 1994.
Well, who are these guys who are talking to Tiny while he's watching Joe Bob's Drive-In Theater?
So that was a group of fans who sort of...
Okay, so it wasn't Monster Vision. Again, like you heard Joe Bob say right there, this is like early to mid-90s. Mid-90s when they sat down and watched it with Tiny Tim, but Joe Bob's Drive-In, that was even before Monster Vision. So I think that this could definitely be like early 90s, that they pulled that clip from, and now they're kind of showing that to Tiny Tim mid-90s. And even Tiny Tim said, after the movie came out, nobody praised it, nobody really talked about it. Probably didn't do anything for his horror career either. And, it's nice that we get the chance to sit down and kind of see Joe Bob talk about some of these movies, because that's always the thing that I loved. He'll always, talk about horror movies that are kind of under the surface. Like they're kind of the, you have the tip of the iceberg and then whatever is underneath it, right? And that's kind of what we do here on this channel too, is like, I grew up always watching the B-movie stuff and the stuff that wasn't really a Hollywood success. And some of those became my favorite horror movies, and not like my favorites, like a top 5 or a top 10 or anything, but those are the horror movies that I loved watching as a kid because it was always just B-movie, campy kind of slasher bullshit. Like it was, it was like I said, people just get together with an idea and a dream to create a movie. And some of them go on to have very successful careers after that. But I mean, in the early 80s and the early 90s, horror movies was a niche genre. It was not as popular as it is today. I mean, maybe like every single month now you get a horror movie from Hollywood or just like a horror movie in your local theater or whatever. But back then, horror was not considered, a popular genre at all. And that's also why I loved it, because it was this kind of just group of misfits. It was like a band of people who wanted to get together and just see something kind of crazy and unique and, not perceived as normal, or also not perceived as successful and popular to the wider audience, to the mainstream. It was just something that people loved. A little thing that made them feel good, right? And that's what the last drive-in, that's what Monster Vision was always about. It was just about bringing the horror community together and expressing ourselves and showing movies like this, so that way they could get more attention and people would know more about the people who made them, the people who went on to have careers after they created, these campy kind of B-movie stuff. But that's what I always loved about horror, is that way before it was the thing that it is today, it was not popular with audiences. It was not this thing that was celebrated. And it was just for a special group of people who just wanted to see stuff like that.
Would follow him around and sort of helped him out. They drove him to gigs and did promotions for his gigs in New England at that time, and they called themselves the Tiny Heads.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, I got to process this, Justin, because I still don't know what I just saw. But let's go back to the movie, and please stick around for at least one more break. How many layers of reality are we working with here? Tiny Tim supporters building up Tiny Tim's ego by telling him how important Joe Bob's Drive-In Theater is. As they all watch it together with only a vague awareness of exactly what I'm saying, except he really responded to the part about Ed Gein. He said, "How did he know that?" Meaning, how did I know that? So Justin, you're watching me watch Tiny, watch me watch Tiny. This is Alice in Wonderland shit.
Next segment break for the Joe Bob 3-star rated movie Blood Harvest, 33 minutes.
Justin, I'm going to make a few about Tiny Tim, and you tell me as the expert whether you think I'm right. Okay. First of all, I've always thought there's something incredibly sad about Tiny Tim. And the sadness was there even at the height of his fame. There's some kind of darkness behind his eyes, as though he's cowering in fear in his heart of hearts, every time he steps onto the stage. And yet he can't not step onto the stage. Even at the end of his life, he was doing circuses and community centers and bookings at the tiniest clubs and the lamest county fairs, any place that would have him, because he couldn't resist and he couldn't stop. So he was kind of like an alcoholic who needs more and more, because right. I know he needed money, but still he wanted that. He needed the stage too. The liquor satisfies him less and less, but at the same time, there's a sweetness and a naivete and a little bit of shyness that would occasionally come through, as though he's pleading with the audience to pretend to love him. All right, because he wasn't a stupid man,
right.
As though he's saying, okay, yes, we know. Very complex guy, very sad guy. All right, that's my take.
In terms of him being uncomfortable being a celebrity, I don't think so. I think that was what he aimed for his entire life. And I think that when he finally did become famous in the late 60s and was arguably for a couple of years, probably the most famous man on 3 continents, I think that it was the memory of that tremendous success that got him through his remaining years.
Right. Well, tell the story briefly of how he did rise to fame in the 60s.
He grew up in Depression-era New York. His parents really didn't understand him. From the very beginning, he was sort of an outcast, sort of a freak within his own family. He had these show business aspirations, which his parents just saw as bizarre and a pipe dream, especially as he rebelled against his mother, who kept telling him to be a man. And I guess what you do to your mother when she tells you to be a man is you become a Tiny Tim. And as his stage persona became even more and more bizarre, in the 50s, before, people were watching white face makeup, he's riding the subway like that. The culture finally was right in America in the late 60s when, you had the counterculture was at its height. And America sort of needed a Tiny Tim. You know, they needed that comic relief, and they needed this sort of highly lovable character. And I think that that's why people gravitated towards him at that time, and he became so famous.
And it was basically Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In.
That was the first big break.
First scene, and then
you know, he was on several dozen times. And then, of course, the most famous appearance, everything culminating in his marriage to Miss Vicky, December of 1969. And that was, you mentioned 45 million viewers, you know, tuned in to watch it. Brownouts were reported in New York that night because of the extra power, less traffic in LA, and less crime in Chicago. And it's the second highest rated telecast of the 60s, next to Man's First Walk on the Moon, is the night Tiny Tim got...
I mean, just think about that, ladies and gentlemen. This is a person who we don't really talk about a lot. You know, his music isn't really mentioned. As Joe Bob said, he kind of just had like a one-hit wonder, and that's kind of all people really know from his music career. But in the 60s, he was at the height of his career. You know, he was probably, like they said, one of the most popular people on the planet in 3 different continents. And in 1969, 45 million viewers just to watch your wedding. That is a big number. That number could change because of all the things like social media and all the different streaming platforms and everything like that. But back then, you know, when you just turned on the TV to watch something entertaining, Tiny Tim had 45 million people watching him just get married. You know, it was the second highest rated broadcast next to the Man on the Moon. And the Man on the Moon was the space race for America when we were at war with Russia in the Cold War, because that was basically us to show Russia, hey, we have something that you don't. Everybody said that the moon landing was staged and that it was just a Hollywood production, which still to this day could be very true because, you know, Russia has not movies themselves, but for them to, you know, for America to show them, hey, you know, we have this power, we have something that you don't. That was big for America in the 60s. Okay, like I said, your Cold War era, and this is even going into basically like Vietnam, right? Because Vietnam was just beginning around these times. So the Vietnam War is also, you know, one of those important pivotal moments going on in America around this time. And people wanted to see Tiny Tim get married to his wife. So 45 million viewers is nothing to snark about. You know, like I said, I couldn't even imagine in today's standards what would happen. But back then, you know, like I said, he was a celebrity. He was kind of a celebrity to these American people in the 60s and the late 60s. So, like I said, basically going into Vietnam era.
Married on the Tonight Show.
Wow. So why did Bill Rebane like him so much?
Tony had a way of winning his audience over. You know, there are people who worked with him for many years who said that they never, you know, that a lot of times people showed up just to laugh at him, but they never saw him not get a standing ovation. And so when Bill Rebane was organizing this festival in Wisconsin and sort of reluctantly booked him to play at this festival, and his promoter at the time said, hey, I'll give you Tiny Tim for cheap if you promise to give him a screen test while he's out there. Rebane said that the results were unconvincing, but later when he was working on Blood Harvest, sort of just popped in his head like, well, why don't we just augment this character Merv to be Tiny Tim? And slowly, when they figured out Tiny couldn't act or memorize any lines, it actually just became marvelous.
Really? He memorized the words to hundreds of songs, right?
Yeah.
He couldn't remember his lines for the movie?
Yeah, he had some savant-like qualities in that sense, where he could rattle off matrix numbers of 78 records from 1913 and who wrote what in 1898 and this and that, but yeah, could not remember his lines for TV or, you know, scripted appearances.
So Blood Harvest is the beginning and the end of Tiny's film career.
His first and last starring role. But he did actually make an appearance years later when he had sort of a comeback, you know, before he died. And he was appearing frequently on the Howard Stern show. So he appears in Howard Stern's autobiographical film, Private.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I'm pretty sure what I have here would have been his Screen Actors Guild card from when he joined the union to appear in Private Parts. And I actually have the paperwork from that. He was paid SAG scale.
Wow, his
SAG
official
credit.
Screen Actors Guild name was Tiny Tim.
Yep. I mean, by then he had just become Tiny Tim. Where did Herbert Corey end and Tiny Tim begin, and vice versa? You know.
Wow, Tim, Tiny. Well, thank you for being with us today, Justin. I hope the producers of The Last Drive-In are taking care of you while you're in Dallas.
Justin Martell and Matt Mandrides are consummate professionals.
So let's go back to Blood Harvest. Talk about levels of reality. We're meta tonight, you know. What is meta? What do people mean when they say aneurysm? And they say that, you know, and this movie is giving me a brain aneurysm.
Ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves, thank you for joining me. We were reconnecting there on our live stream with YouTube. So thank you very much for watching me. Hold on, guys. Getting a little bit of a text here. Need to view this. Okay. So it looks like we're back. We reconnected to YouTube. I did just want to mention with Joe Bob's note there on what is meta. When I watched the most recent Batman movie, it was the most recent Batman where the Riddler is the main villain and everything. I thought that was like one of the most meta Batman films that I ever watched. I mean, it was dark, it was gritty, there was action, it had all the characters that you would want to see from like the comics, like Penguin and Carmine Falcone, Catwoman. Zoe Kravitz is a great Catwoman, by the way. I don't think she gets as much praise as she should. Kravitz is Catwoman. She's also been recently on her own as a director and a writer. Most recently, I believe she did Blink twice, and that movie was actually really good too. So she is like a really good, you know, kind of like star power also. When we talk about meta, I mean, I kind of refer to it as like the thing that is most true to like the original. Like it's basically what you would expect. What Christopher Nolan was trying to do with the Dark Knight franchise was he wanted to make everything feel more real as opposed to the comic books. So Tim Burton before him, who made Batman 1 and then Batman Returns, and you know, then you have, he didn't work on Batman and Robin, and he didn't work on Batman Forever, but he did make the first two, which he just wanted to be, you know, as true to the comics as they could be also, but they felt more like a natural kind of comic book movie, almost what Marvel tries to do today with their movies. How, like I said, I just prefer DC Universe over Marvel because I'm more of a detective person, and Batman is my favorite superhero. When it comes to Marvel, my favorite superheroes are Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, Thor, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man. But I think, you know, Tim Burton, he just wanted to stay as true to the comics as he could, and just make a genuine comic book movie. That's why the Joker is very cartoony, and he's very, you know, he almost feels like, right, Jack Nicholson's Joker. And then after that, when you had Christopher Nolan start to direct the Batman movies and make his own versions of them, he always said how he wanted to make the characters just based more in reality. So what would the Joker be like if he was a real person? What would Bane be like if he was a real person? What would Catwoman be like, right? So all of Hank, and his version was supposed to be centered more around the reality of like what would a Batman universe look like if this was to happen in real life, right? And then I believe with the Christopher Reeves Batman, the most recent one, like I said, that was like the most meta Batman movie that I had ever watched, and that to me basically means something that is just true to the original, where it's like, this is like watching the comic book finally on the movie screen, right? So that to me is what the most recent Batman was. I love the most recent Batman movie. You know, a little bit of favoritism from myself too. I kind of love all the Batman movies. there hasn't really been a Batman movie that was bad to me. And I know I could catch a lot of flack for that because people are going to say, you like Ben Affleck as Batman? Yes, I enjoy seeing Ben Affleck play Batman. The Batman and Robin movies, and then Batman Forever, like I said, those were just a lot of the campy kind of outrageous stuff that I enjoyed watching growing up. And like I said, Batman's my favorite superhero, so a little bit of favoritism from myself as well. But that's what meta means to me, is like, I could describe it as like the most recent Batman movie. That is like a meta Batman movie where it's like, this is how Batman from the comic books is trying to be portrayed on the movie screen.
And so Sarah becomes either the third or fourth victim of the mysterious killer with pantyhose over his head. As you've probably noticed by now, this is a small cast and it's all shot in the same location, and that location was the shooting ranch in Lincoln County, Wisconsin, way up north, close to nothing, and it was part of a working farm owned by Bill Rebane. Now, Bill was one of those one-man band producers who wrote, directed, produced, distributed his own films, similar to Earl Owensby, the one-man band guy in Shelby, North Carolina, and Herschel Gordon Lewis, the one-man band in Chicago. But Rebane is an interesting story. He was born in 1937 in Latvia. His father was Estonian, and he was raised in Germany during the years leading up to and including World War II, mostly fleeing the war-torn regions of Europe with his mom. And he luckily ended up in the western part of Germany at the end of the war, so he was able to immigrate to America at the age of 17 and get a job at WGN-TV in Chicago. That's mostly where he learned about film. He studied drama at the Goodman Theater, and then he made 2 short films that he sold to American International Pictures, Dance Craze and Twist Craze. He started making a movie called Monster A Go-Go, but he never finished it. But Herschel Gordon Lewis bought the footage from him, and he finished it. And then somehow he ends up in Gleason, Wisconsin, making extremely low-budget movies. His big hit was The Giant Spider Invasion in 1975. We probably need to show that on Last Drive-In one of these days. He also made The Capture of Bigfoot, Twister's Revenge, The Demons of Ludlow, and what they all had in common was terrible scripts, but often... Now, professional acting doesn't really help much when the script is bad, but...
That sounds like the Marvel movie Eternals to me, right? It's got a terrible script, but you got fucking outstanding actors in the movie who could just try to carry it as best as they can, but that script isn't about to save it. That was the Marvel Eternals. Now, like I said, I am and is my favorite. There are Marvel characters that I do enjoy, and the only reason I wanted to see Eternals was for my bae Salma Hayek.
For example, in this movie, Antonia Salacek plays the lead role of Jill. This is her only movie role. She disappeared after this, but I think she does a more than passable job with not much to work with, and she passes for American, even though you can occasionally hear the hint of an East European accent. The only famous actor besides Tiny Tim was Peter Krause as the boyfriend. This was his first role, but he would later guest on Seinfeld. He would win starring roles in Sports Night and also in 6 Feet Under. Right now, he's in the series 911. And by the way, he refused to take off his jeans when he was doing that love scene with Antonia Salacek. All right, let's get back to the fascinating train wreck of a performance by Tiny Tim in the 1987 drive-in oddity, Blood Harvest. It's actually not that rare that the guys will refuse to get naked for the camera more than the women. You know, actually, there's 2 kinds of guys. The ones that get naked at the drop of a hat, you have to tell them to put their clothes back on. And then the ones that won't even take off their shirt unless they pump iron every day for 6 weeks before their 5-second shirtless scene. You know, women get hammered if they don't do the nude scene. Say, well, we couldn't use her. Refused to pop her top. You know, even though it was necessary to the plot. But if a guy refuses to drop trowel, it's just, well, nobody wanted to see his butox anyway. You know, I'm sure somebody wants to see his butox. You know, I mean, I don't want to see his butox. But girls like butox. And actually boys like butox too. So We just don't want to see Tiny Tim's butox. That's the main point here.
All right, next segment break. This is an hour and 6 minutes.
Apparently, Bill Rebane didn't do the math on this movie. If you have a small cast and you kill off most of it, it's not hard to figure out who the pantyhose-faced killer is, if only because he's more agile than the other possible suspect. Once again, almost all of Tiny Tim's scenes are alone. He's either putting on his makeup or singing a song or praying in church or praying in his kitchen or crying or something emotional, but always by himself. And you get the impression that even in his personal life, he was mostly by himself, even when he was surrounded by people. Maybe we can ask our next guest. Yes, this is a first. We have not one, but two visiting on Tiny Tim Night. Please welcome Bucks Burnett, the producer of Tiny Tim's last two albums. I'll give you a hand, Bucks.
All right.
Producer of Tiny Tim's last two albums, and that sounds like the applause Tiny would get at the circus.
Yeah, pretty much.
President of the Tiny Tim International Fan Club at one time, I understand, or is there still an International Tiny Tim Fan Club?
Yes, it's called YouTube.
Oh, okay. Has anybody here ever heard Tiny Tim's cover of Stairway to Heaven with Brave Combo? I'm telling you, it rocks. It's really good.
It does rock.
So welcome, Bucks. Did you produce that?
So I called Tiny, say, hey, Tiny, what if I bring you to Dallas and we record Stairway to Heaven? And he said, well, Mr. Burnett, I think it would have to go something like this. And it just broke out an a cappella arrangement through my phone that was exactly what you hear on the record, just instantaneously occurred.
Wow.
Immediately after hanging up from Tiny, I called Jimmy Page and asked his permission to get Tiny to do the cover of Stairway. I'm not obligated legally to ask his permission, but I wanted to be a gentleman. He said, Bucks, I think that'd be lovely. You know, Tim's quite the underrated genius.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? Well, you know, most people don't know that Tiny Tim had a pretty powerful lyric baritone voice.
Yes, he did.
And so tell me how you met Tiny, though. Let's back up.
He played a small Dallas club called Confetti in 1982.
I remember Confetti.
And I was raised on Laugh-In, so I was already aware of Tiny from his heyday in 68, 69. So 82 is like 12 years into the nowhere years of Tiny, also known as the rest of his entire life. So, but I thought, hey, it'd be great to go see Tiny, and if I'm going to bother to go see him play, I might as well sneak backstage and meet him and try and get an interview, which I did. And one thing led to another, and I ended up being his manager and producer the last 10 years of his life.
Wow. So were you his manager and producer at the time of Blood Harvest?
Kinda.
Yeah. What did you think of Blood Harvest at the time?
Well, I bought the VHS the day it came out.
Yeah.
And that's because there was no DVD yet, right? State-of-the-art VHS tape. And I played it, and at first I thought this is kind of a slow start, but whatever. And then I realized that it was missing, in your trade, I believe there's 2 tracks of audio on a piece of film. The dialogue audio and the incidental or whatever audio. So the entire length of Blood Harvest, which I did watch all the way through once like this, had no dialogue but footsteps and coffee cups being put on tables and stuff. So to this day, I have no idea of what dialogue is in there, but it's sort of a Brian Eno remix.
Okay, so you never went back and watched his soliloquies and his emoting and all
It hadn't
that?
happened yet.
You knew him so well.
I know.
So what was your relationship with him like? Would you say you were close?
No, I don't think anybody was really friends with Tiny Tim. It's not the way of his home planet.
Did you think he was a talent or a novelty?
Both.
Yeah?
As did he.
Yeah. And why do you think Tiny never acted again?
Because nobody asked. He once said that his greatest professional desire in life was to be in a Raid commercial, and he pitched this to the Raid Corporation more than once. He wanted to have a commercial in which all the cockroaches had little tiny Tim heads animated onto them, and he'd spray them and they'd all go away.
Did he work on that idea a long time? Did he script that out?
He mentioned it a few times over several years.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Bucks.
Thank you, Joe Bob. Thank you, Shutter Network.
The next segment break for the movie Blood Harvest. This is after the end credits.
And so Marvelous Mervo, the deranged clown, turns out to be the savior of Jill and lives on to sing yet another excruciating jingle over the closing credits. A classic of drive-in history. Bill Rebane still lives in Wisconsin, by the way, still makes movies at the age of 81. Tiny Tim died in 1996 at the age of 64, just 2 years after watching Blood Harvest for the very first time on my movie channel show. That still blows my mind. Something about this whole story and this whole night. Our second feature tonight and our concluding movie for the season on the last drive-in is Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2, one of the favorite movies of Darcy the Mail Girl. Come on out, Darcy.
Darcy, ladies and gentlemen.
I have a lot of respect
Darcy,
for
the lovely
on
mail
opening
girl.
night, and move on to that. It's time for the old drive-in mag. Darcy, I know you can't wait for Hello, Mary Lou.
You have no idea. I'm so excited, and it's so amazing that this is the last of the whole season.
Yeah. How many times have you seen Hello, Mary Lou?
I have no idea. Like over 100 at least.
Whoa, over 100?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Do you have a favorite scene?
That kind of sounds like me with Freddy versus Jason, okay? I probably have seen Freddy versus Jason over 100 times, and still every time that I watch it, I love it more and more. Like I said, if it's not one of my favorite horror movies, it is my favorite horror movie. Freddy versus Jason, Freddy Krueger versus Jason Voorhees. I've watched it at least over 100 times, and like I said, every time I watch it, I fall in love with it more and more.
The locker room scene is
The first time I actually watched Freddy vs. Jason, and this is kind of interesting considering this is the last drive-in with Joe Bob. The first time I ever seen Freddy vs. Jason, here in Buffalo, New York. So I believe they were playing a double feature. It was Freddy vs. Jason, and I also got to see Jeepers Creepers 2. Watch both of those at the drive-in. So it's kind of come full circle that now we're watching the last drive-in here with Joe Bob.
like one of the best scenes in any movie ever made.
Really? Because of the kill or because of the full frontal or the...
Both.
Yeah.
It all works together.
Full frontal in that scene. We got a lot of full frontal tonight. They went full frontal in the movie we just watched. All right, what you got for me?
Okay. So we keep getting mail about Dinners of Death.
All right, because a lot of people spent Thanksgiving with us.
It did. That's so sweet. This one's from Dave Kralik of San Diego.
Okay.
Joe Bob
Hi,
wants
Joe
more
Bob.
hate mail.
Without looking up any online theories about the ending of Dead or Alive, I talked about how I don't understand the ending of Dead or Alive. I think characters died from the gunshots, but they had a Jacob's Ladder moment, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. Japan's destruction was colorful imagery representing how far each would go to destroy their enemy. There's a similar twist in Ichi the Killer, where Kakihara has an epic fight with Ichi, but we later find evidence the fight never occurred outside Kakihara's imagination. So yes, Takashi Miike likes to mess with the audience. Keep up the good work. The drive-in will never die. Dave in San Diego. You know what, Dave? I think you've nailed it. That's actually the first suggestion that's made sense to me, especially since blowing up Japan would make perfect sense if Miike is essentially saying, hey, this is kind of what's wrong with this country. This stuff is destroying the country. So very good. I love it when people figure stuff out for me. All right, we are minutes away from the final movie in the 2019 Last Drive-In series. Are you excited?
Oh my God, yes.
Did I tell you the one about the Scottish lad and the Scottish lass who were sitting on the stone wall holding hands over the lock? Well, for several minutes they sat there silently, and then finally the girl looks at the boy and she says, "A penny for your thoughts, Angus." And Angus said, "Well, I was thinking perhaps it's about time for a wee cuddle." And the girl blushes and leans over and she cuddles him. And then he blushes. And then the two turn once again to gaze out over the lot. And after a while, the girl spoke again. She said, "Another penny for your thoughts, Angus?" And Angus says, "Well, I was thinking perhaps it's about time for a wee kiss." And the girl blushed, and then she leaned over and she kissed him. And then he blushed. And then the two turned once again to gaze out over the lot. And after a while, the girl spoke again. Another penny for your thoughts, Angus? His brow. He said, well, now, he said, my thoughts are a bit more serious. And the girl says, really? And he says, aye. The girl looks away in shyness, and she begins to blush and bite her lip, and she's waiting to hear the ultimate request. And Angus says, didn't you think it's about time you paid me those first 2 pennies? Didn't you think it's about time you paid me those first 2 pennies?
Don't you think it's about time you paid me those first 2 pennies? All right, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. This is going to be episode 17, the final episode of season 4 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. It is Hello Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. We're going to take a brief intermission, about 1.5, 2 minutes. My phone is about at 50%, so I'm going to try to put it on the charger when we come back. That'll be very interesting to see how that works out, because again, I have no more balance option on my phone. I'm basically balancing it between my laptop and the TV right now where my PS5 setup is. So I'm actually surprised that it's holding on this good. Trying to get a new phone case. Like I said, don't really have the money for that right now. It's not really in the budget. Soon we will try to take care of that problem. But we'll take about a 1.5, 2 minute break here. And then it will be the final episode, episode 17, The Last Drive-In, season 4 with Joe Bob. And once again, salute to our new subscriber on YouTube, LJ. Thank you very much for your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight, especially everybody on YouTube and Twitch here. We're sipping on some Arnold Palmer, half and half, iced tea, and lemonade. Salute. I will be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Please get yourself a drink, get yourself a snack, maybe some ice cream, maybe some popcorn. Make yourselves comfortable. We will be right back for the final episode. Okay. I checked on the dog. Grizz is good. Grizz is definitely doing good. Grizzly Bear. He's hanging out upstairs. Used to have him down here with me, but they preferred him to be upstairs. I kind of miss having a dog down here with me. Maybe in the future I'll be able to get some bearded dragons again, and we'll be able to hang out with the bearded dragons. That doesn't look too bad. I got my phone on the charger right now because it was pushing about 50%. So I didn't want it to die here for the last episode. But that actually looks like it's getting the angle pretty good. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampire wolves. This is the final episode, episode 17 of The Last Drive-In, Season 4 with Joe Bob Briggs. He is going to be watching and talking about the movie Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight. Again, this is our Season 4 finale. After this, we're going to get into Season 5 for the month of September. After Season 5, when October comes around, we will do the October and the Halloween specials. Thanksgiving will be the Thanksgiving specials, I believe, even though there's not too many of those, so we'll probably also throw in another season with that. And then when December comes around, we will do the Christmas specials for The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. And that will be our end of 2024 together. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here with me tonight again. I appreciate the new subscriber that we have on YouTube here. Shout out to LJ. Salute, LJ. We're sipping on some Arnold Palmer, half and half, iced tea and lemonade. For anybody out there wondering what we're sipping on tonight. And spooky season is around the corner. I hope you're feeling it, chat. Spooky season is upon us, even though it's technically already spooky season for me. Fucking every day is Halloween for me. But once again, thank you for joining me tonight. This is episode 17, season 4 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. Hello, Mary Lou, Prime Night 2.
Well, here we are at the end of another Last Drive-In party. I thought I was done with this 10 months ago when we did the Last Drive-In 24-hour Dusk to Dawn to Dusk to Almost Dawn Again Friday the 13th 13 movie exhaustathon thing. But no, you people just kept asking for more and more and more, punishing us with your horror fetishes, which in some cases were terrifying just to know about. But the thing you have in common, every last one of you, is you always want to watch stuff from the 80s. So tonight we're winding up this Shudder series with a classic of the 80s, also a classic of high school horror, a classic of supernatural horror, a classic of Canadian horror, and a classic of Catholic horror, which is always fun because it involves crucifixes and confessionals and demons. And you know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about Hello, Mary Lou, which is also called Prom Night 2, even though it has nothing to do with Prom Night 1, they just used the title. The original title was actually The Haunting of Hamilton High, but they decided to use the sappy lyrics of a Ricky Nelson song, actually one of the most dim-witted songs in rock and roll history, if you can even say that Ricky Nelson is part of rock and roll history. And I guess they were thinking, hey, we'll take this white bread idea of high school puppy love and we'll get nasty with it. So whatever the idea was that they had, it worked. Darcy, this is one of your favorite movies, isn't it?
Oh yeah, like top 5 horror films.
Darcy the Mail Girl, you told me last month that you have a poster of Mary Lou Maloney, the demon girl in Hello, Mary Lou, hanging over your bed. That is actually sick, Darcy.
She's a role model.
Oh, man. Okay. You know, all horror roads eventually lead back to high school. That's when people usually discover horror films. So for most of history, that was the main audience for horror, people age 14 to 20. And danger to young people is always scarier than danger to old people because, you know, the old people.
Me, I grew up watching horror movies with my mom. Me and my mom absolutely love the horror genre. I watched it probably as young as like 2-3 years old. And I basically grew up as a horror fan. My father actually never really liked horror movies. For him, he was more like action, mafia movies, comedies he loved. You know, he loved the Adam Sandler stuff, so that's why I love Adam Sandler as an actor and stuff. But for him, it was like Arnold Schwarzenegger stuff, Sylvester Stallone with these right there. Looks like we're back on YouTube. I apologize for the technical difficulties tonight, guys, but we are reconnected. If there were two people I would use to describe my dad, he was kind of a combination of Robert De Niro and The Undertaker, Mark Calloway. So if you can kind of picture those two, was pretty much my dad. But yeah, he wasn't really big into the horror genre. He didn't really appreciate it as much as me and my mom. He actually would, he would consider the movies really stupid because to him, he never really understood what some of them were about and stuff. But like I said, he loved the comedy stuff, he loved actions, and he loved, his American Italian mafia movies.
Are old, so there's no possibility of off in the prime, so people can say, he had his whole life before him. He didn't have his whole life before him. He just got skewered by a maniac. Anyhow, I used to do presentations at high schools, but I don't do those anymore because high schools scare the crap out of me. As soon as you enter a high school campus.
For anybody who doesn't know, since I'm actually talking about it, my dad's favorite movie, we actually watched it together in the theaters when it came out. It was a Will Smith movie, and it was I think the reason he liked it so much was honestly because that's how a lot of mine and his life were together. My parents were divorced when I was basically when I was born, and they never really had the greatest of relationships. So when that movie came out, The Pursuit of Happiness, it really kind of shows you the lifestyle that me and him had together. Plumber, so he basically did some of the worst jobs I've ever seen somebody do in my life, but he made decent money. I remember him taking me on side jobs, and he wanted me to actually follow in his footsteps, but I told him no, I'm definitely not being a plumber, which kind of hurt his feelings a bit because I could see from a father's perspective how you want your son to, learn from you and be like you in a way, but I would always tell him, I'm my own person and I need to do my own thing. I always, I wanted to make it in sports. I wanted to do something with WWE. I wanted to do something with wrestling. He thought that was a fucking joke. He didn't like wrestling at all. I remember getting into a big, not a big argument, but I just remember one time I got really fucking frustrated and I just straight up asked him, if there is anybody here that you do appreciate out of wrestlers, who do you like? Isn't there anybody that you like out of everybody that's here? And that's when he told me The Undertaker. So from that point on, The Undertaker was his favorite wrestler. Whenever I got Undertaker merchandise, shirts, posters, anything with The Undertaker, I would always give it to him because I knew that was his favorite wrestler. And even as much as he hated wrestling, he would always take me to the show. Always buy tickets so me and him could watch it. I think it was a little bit of a bonding thing, looking back on it now. But he always hated it. He thought that wrestling was really stupid too. But he loved The Undertaker, so he did appreciate seeing The Undertaker. And for me, he did take me to many events. I mean, we probably seen 8 or 10 events together. Some of the standout ones is the Great American Bash 2005, Armageddon 2008, where Jeff Hardy won his first WWE championship. Those are definitely some of the standouts for me. And he would take me to, Buffalo Bills games at the stadium back when it was Ralph Wilson Stadium and then New Era. The last time I ever went to a Buffalo Bills game was with him in 2011 when we had Ryan Fitzpatrick as a quarterback. I haven't been to the stadium or seen a Bills game live ever since that. But he would take me to the Bills games, and his favorite movie was The Pursuit of Happiness. And I just remember that movie really sticking with him, I think, because it represented mine and his relationship so much together.
You think you're going to be arrested for something because they have all these signs everywhere. This is a drug-free zone. This is an alcohol-free zone. This is a smoke-free zone. I'll tell you how weird I am. My high school, We had a smoking section.
I actually remember telling him, I remember telling my father how he knew I wanted to do something with wrestling. He knew I wanted to be involved with WWE, and again, that was just a big ass joke to him. And then I even remember telling him, well, you know what? If you don't believe in that dream, I want to do something with, writing and directing. I want to make movies. I want to make my own movies one day. And I remember telling him that, and he was kind of impressed by the idea of that. But still, to him, it was very unrealistic because, again, to him, like, I was just a failure at school. I didn't have good grades. I would never get into like a New York Film Academy or anything like that. My idea was to go down to Florida, where I know absolutely nothing about Florida. I've never fucking been to Florida. Um, I was going to study at Full Sail University to learn how to write and direct movies. Um, and actually, his dream for retirement, he was kind of close to retirement. He died at the age of 53. Um, but his dream for when he retired was he wanted to move down to Florida, I believe Miami specifically, but he wanted to move down to Florida and he wanted to buy himself a fishing boat and he just wanted to do fishing. Me and him would always fish together. So that's where I learned how to do fishing. Maybe at some point on the channel here, I'll upload some fishing videos and we'll get to hang out and do some fishing together. But that was his dream for retirement. He just wanted to move out of Buffalo, New York and move down to Miami, Florida, buy himself a fishing boat and do some fishing on the boat. That was his retirement goal. He never got to accomplish that. And again, he was just really hard on my dreams too. I do remember when he seen me kind of learning how to play hockey and when he seen me figure out, like, because you got to learn how to ice skate first before you can even play hockey. So he didn't know how to ice skate, like he never played hockey. If anything, he played football when he was in high school and shit. He was a guard. He was a pass protector, he would protect the quarterback. So his position was guard. And I remember him watching me doing ice skating for the first time and learning how to ice skate, and I picked it up like that. I mean, it only took me like a fucking day. Like the first day I went out on the ice, I pretty much was a natural and I learned how to do it. But that impressed him. That was like one of the first times I ever seen that he was actually impressed with me, and he actually kind of gave me some credit for like learning how to do that. And he knew that I love sports though. He knew, I wanted to be involved with wrestling and I wanted to be involved with the WWE. And I remember telling him, I'm going to write and direct movies of my own one day. And that was a dream of mine. But his dream for retirement was pretty much just move down to Florida, buy a boat and do some fishing, which he never got to accomplish that dream. He died before he could even retire. But, that was definitely some things that I remember.
For the students, and then they have all these policies and rules and legal disclaimers, and the principal and all the teachers are always talking about zero tolerance. This is a zero tolerance school. They have zero tolerance for this, zero tolerance for that. You know what?
My dad was very zero tolerance. He'd fucking put his foot down on me any chance he could. He was very zero tolerance to a T.
I have zero tolerance for anybody who keeps saying zero tolerance over and over again. You see it on signs at bars. You see it in press releases. This is like the new thing for self-righteous assholes to say, CEOs like to say it every time they fire somebody. You even hear it on occasion from a judge. He's the one person in society who's expected to temper justice with mercy, right? One reason the Catholics keep getting hammered for all their crimes is that the archbishops refuse to say zero tolerance because their whole religion is based on, that pesky concept called forgiveness of sin. So zero tolerance is how we ended up with those 3,000 kids separated from their parents at the Mexican border because somebody in the government thinks, hey, I know how to stop that alien menace. Zero tolerance. And so the wrong people get picked up, Zero tolerance is how a 15-year-old boy gets arrested and barred from school and possibly saddled with a permanent criminal record because he mouths off on Instagram about how much he hates his school. Zero tolerance is how kids get suspended from school for carrying pocket knives that they bought on vacation while they were touring the Indian reservation. Zero tolerance is how CEOs get fired by the board because they don't realize that an employee was beating his wife 30 years ago. Zero tolerance is how stupid jokes and clumsy attempts to get a date become demotions, suspensions without pay, permanent ostracism. Zero tolerance is how a talented film director gets fired for offhand Twitter comments that he made a decade ago and apologized for a decade ago. See, zero tolerance is for lazy people. Zero tolerance is for people who they don't want to evaluate human behavior at all. They just want a set of marching orders that tell them exactly what to do when a certain set of words are spoken, or a certain type of complaint is received, or a certain degree of social media anger is reached. Zero tolerance is for arrogant, holier-than-thou, moral police officers who want everybody to know how pure of heart they are. And zero tolerance, by the way, is especially hard on people who are autistic or who maybe have Asperger's syndrome, because they often don't realize the consequences of their actions or the boundaries within which they're expected to work. But even in less extreme cases, people who are just overly emotional, or they talk too much because they're needy. That zero tolerance is like this cruel machete that's used to weed them out of acceptable society. Zero tolerance gets especially weird when university professors fall in love with their grad students, or vice versa. And because lots of universities call that virtue of your teaching position. Examine closely, it might just be romance, Zero tolerance is not good for anything except murder. We ought to be zero. And actually, if you're accused of murder, you still have a whole array of options allowing you to prove in court that it wasn't really murder. It was self-defense or justifiable homicide. You have tools to defend yourself. And 99% of these zero that are ashamed or whatever. It's not supposed to work this way. There's supposed to be a person in the head office, some older person, some calm, wise, seasoned person, who comes downstairs in the middle of these zero tolerance cases and says, well, that's ridiculous. This is not why the policy was created. Let this guy go. But the calm, wise, seasoned, older person, he doesn't exist anymore. We've just become Nazis, commissars. Human nature. We're terrified. We might have to look into an accused person's eyes and see that he was just weak. We're terrified we might see ourselves in those eyeballs. Did you ever think that today, with all the nasty stuff being said and done in this country, we might need tolerance? I know y'all didn't expect me to go here tonight, but it's the last movie. And you know that on the last movie, we always do something about peace and harmony and unity and ending the hate, right? So to start out, there shouldn't be zero tolerance about anything. That's for totalitarian societies. That's for Saudi Arabia, okay? That's for Russia. That's not here. And speaking of scary high schools, I first saw Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2 in 1987 at the Gemini Drive-In right here in Dallas. And it only played for 1 week. And then it got jerked off the screens by communist theater owners claiming they had to make room for the indoor bull stuff Christmas movies because it came out right at Thanksgiving. And then it just got lost. And it had already totally bombed in Canada, even though it's probably one of the finest, purity, old-fashioned dead teenager flicks of that whole era of dead teenager movies. It's your basic Linda Blairsville, to quote one of the characters in the movie, where Mary Lou is the high school girl who goes to the prom, ditches her date, starts aardvarking backstage with a campus cretin, and makes her boyfriend so mad he lobs a stink bomb on stage while she's getting crowned queen of the prom. Whoops! 3 Mile Island in a prom dress. Richard Pryor foo. Richard Pryor foo probably being a reference I now have to explain because nobody remembers how Richard Pryor set his face on fire. But anyway, now it's 30 years later and the boyfriend is the high school principal. And the campus cretin is a Catholic priest. And a little blonde number named Vicky is trying to be prom queen. And down in the high school basement, there's an old trunk with Mary Lou's prom dress in it and her crown, and a ghost that likes to rip the veins out of anybody that touches that crown. In other words, Mary Lou is hanging around the locker room searching for a body to aardvark in. How about this girl, Vicky, the one that wants to be prom queen, but her Bible-thumping mother won't let her buy a new dress? How about little Miss Thunder Thighs? In other words, it's time to party again. So let's look at those drive-in totals and get to it. We have 7 dead bodies. 7 breasts.
7 breasts.
1 post-toasty prom queen. Zombie cafeteria. Haunted lascivious hobby horse. Lasered eyes. Neon wall decoration through the stomach. Stink bomb foo. Water fountain foo. Volleyball foo. Bunsen burner to the crotch foo. Drive-In Academy Award nominations for Brock conniving computer nerd for saying, life's a joke, then you croak. Richard Monette as the horny priest for trying to fight a demon with a crucifix. Beth Gondek as the doomed best friend for her two enormous talents. Beverly Hendry as the school bimbo for getting her brains squished in a locker. The great Michael Ironside as the school principal with a dirty secret. Bruce Pittman, the director, for being Canadian but making a decent horror flick anyhow. And Wendy Lyon as Vicky the Linda Blair girl for screaming, "Leave me alone" at Mary Lou's ghost and destroying a perfectly good radio young woman, and for saying, "That's my name, don't wear it out," and places to go, people to go, and for turning all slutty on us right before she becomes a killer demon. 4 stars. Joe Bob says, check it out.
Prom Night 2, 4-star movie.
But you know what'll happen now? Because of the title of this movie, nobody will be able to get that song out of their heads all week. That was Ricky Nelson's #1 hit. If you go up to DeKalb, Texas, which is just west of Texarkana, they'll tell you, oh yeah, Ricky Nelson died here. They're like proud of it. And it's because his plane crashed in the woods outside DeKalb. Now, I don't think he'd ever been to DeKalb. I'm sure he didn't want to go to, he certainly didn't want to go to DeKalb that particular day, you know, but it's amazing what people will be proud of, you know. Oh yeah, Ricky Nelson. You know, maybe we can drive out there
big
to the
one.
crash site. Yeah. Yep, part of DeKalb history. You know, he did that song, Hello, Mary Lou. They got mashed into pieces right here in town, you know. Maybe that's just a Texas thing, because my grandmother liked to say stuff like that, you know. You remember May Ellen Struthers? Drop dead on the street. just relishing that kind of story.
The first segment break for Prom Night 2 is at 28 minutes.
And so both Jess and her unborn baby are destroyed by some nasty force that obviously objects to a fake gemstone being popped out of the prom queen tiara. You can almost see the producer's hand at work in that scene as she's being dragged toward the paper cutter for an almost certain beheading with projectile blood splatter, and somebody says, nah, too expensive. So suddenly she's hanged with a sheet instead. Meanwhile, there's a lot going on in this screenplay. Very tight, very proficient screenplay, using elements taken from The Exorcist, from Carrie, from Nightmare on Elm Street. I would say that hung from a sheet image is probably taken from Dario Argento. And you will notice as we proceed that the last name of every character is a famous horror director. 9 of them, including 4 characters we've already seen. Vicky Carpenter, the blonde star of the film, named after John Carpenter, of course. Kelly Henenlotter, the bitchy girl, named after Frank Henenlotter of Basket Case fame. Monica Waters, the girl who wonders why no guys ever ask her out while she's dissing the guy who's asking her out, named after John Waters. And Jess Browning, the alt girl who just took a header out the window, named after the legendary Todd Browning from the 1930s. This script is by Ron Oliver, obviously a horror script, and he thought it would be his last script after the movie premiered in Toronto and the critics just totally savaged it and nobody came. Its reputation got slightly resurrected by a review in the Los Angeles Times when it finally opened in the U.S. Kevin Thomas called it the blue velvet of high school horror. And so Ron, based on that review, decided to pack up and move to LA himself, where he was appreciated. And he lives there to this day as a very successful director, writer, composer, producer. There's a lot of TV movies, some series. Directed and wrote the 3rd movie in the Prom Night series called Prom Night 3, The Last Kiss. Don't watch that one. Okay, and the director of Hello, Mary Lou is a guy named Bruce Pittman, who came from the advertising and publicity side of the motion picture business. He worked for Famous Players in Toronto. He did market research for Paramount in Canada. He was the owner and manager of the Review Cinema, which to this day is the coolest independent theater in Toronto. They even show silent films there. Anybody that shows silent films is incredibly awesome, in my opinion. So anyway, he came up through the production side of film. He started as a production assistant on the movie Reflections of Murder, which was a John Badham television remake of the French horror film Les Diaboliques. Why would you do that? Why would you remake Les Diaboliques at all? But much less as a TV movie, because it's all about dark sexual themes. Don't you need nudity for that? Why would you do that on TV? Anyhow, he was a PA on that, and then he created the Canadian series Saturday Night at the Movies. He hosted that. He would interview the directors and stars of classic movies, and he says that's how he learned to direct. I can tell you, Bruce, bad way to learn to direct. Anyhow, he became a mid-level director in Canada, mostly. All right, back to the movie. Filmed in Edmonton. See, the thing about showing all this 80s stuff is that in the 80s, everybody had access to that Canadian funny money. The Canadian government would go, you've watched a movie at your neighborhood theater and now you would like to make a movie? Okay, here's $1 million. You could get money for anything Canadian. This movie has a 100% Canadian cast and crew. That's why Michael Ironside is in it, because there aren't that many stars to choose from that will work low budget, and they're Canadian. So if you can't afford Donald Sutherland or William Shatner, you have to go Michael Ironside. But these 80s movies are going to keep us on our toes geography-wise, because, all right, where is Edmonton?
Alberta.
Know? Where's Edmonton? You've all vacationed in Edmonton, right? Alberta, right? And where is Alberta? No clue. Okay. See, it's in the prairie. All these places in Canada, when you don't know where they are, they're in the prairie. The prairie is what they call any place in Canada that's lonely, windswept, full of moose, deer flaps, and they all live out where the bus don't stop no more. That's the prairie.
Edmonton and Calgary have the Alberta rivalry in hockey. Edmonton versus Calgary. Next segment break, 40 minutes.
Okay, we got all these great zombie effects, all the dead people from 1957, the face of Mary Lou, the rows of lockers, the volleyball net, spider web, which is another image they stole from horror history. That's a Mario Bava thing. And then Principal Billy, played by Michael Ironside, goes down there and opens up the steamer trunk that has all Mary Lou's stuff in it. I think that's what's in it. Why would they keep all Mary Lou's stuff in the theater prop room? I don't know. But he knows that if you open up that trunk, it releases the Mary Lou demon. Only how would he know that? And why is Father Cooper, the priest, who was the guy aardvarking with Mary Lou at the prom, right, burned off by the stink bomb, why is Father Cooper crossing himself in front of an altar to Mary Lou? Isn't that like majorly satanic? Why doesn't he just say, Billy did it, and go on to his next slutty girlfriend? Obviously, this whole plot requires closer examination, but the secret is that steamer trunk. This is one of the best movies ever made with a no-name cast, by the way, proving that great horror doesn't really need movie stars. And sometimes it even suffers when it does have movie stars, because all the weaknesses of The Changeling that we showed a few weeks back, all its weaknesses were caused by having Scott in the lead. Anyway, my point is, here's the cast of this movie. Lisa Schrage, she plays Mary Lou, kind of the Barbara Stanwyck of horror. Born in Vancouver, grew up in Toronto. The only other role we would recognize her for is the lead in Food of the Gods 2, 2 years after this flick, and then she disappears altogether in the 90s. Wendy Lyon plays Vicky. She's still working today. She had a small part as a secretary in The Shape of Water. But most of her career has been walk-ons and TV movies, a lot of commercials. Before this role, she was best known for playing Prissy Andrews in the Canadian miniseries Anne of Green Gables. Justin Lewis plays Craig. Works all the time, has starred in 12 different TV series, was in one of the Saw movies. He was in Breaking Bad. He was in one of my favorite flicks from the 80s, Blood and Donuts. That may be from the 90s. He did a whole lot of Mazda commercials and voiceovers. In other words, he's kind of a middle-of-the-road journeyman actor. Richard Monette as Father Cooper, pretty much a theater guy. He went to the National Theatre School of Canada, worked in many stage productions. Interesting story on him, though. Right after he made this movie, he retired from the theater due to stage fright. How do you act for 25 years and then come down with stage fright? I don't know, but it happened to Richard. So he became director of the Stratford Festival in Ontario, which is a very famous summer Shakespeare festival in Niagara Falls. They don't just do Shakespeare, but they do serious drama. Terry Hawks as Kelly, the aggressive girl who's determined to be the prom queen. She was also in Killer Party. Continued to do a lot of Canadian TV, lives in Toronto. Brock Simpson as Josh, the nerd, the only actor who was in all 4 prom nights. In the first movie, he's young Nick. In the third one, he plays Larry. In Prom Night 4, he's the priest. Now, why was he in all 4 movies? Because his father is Peter Simpson, producer of all the prom nights. Peter's a major Canadian producer, head of North Star Filmed Entertainment. Who else? Beverly Henry as Monica, had a dozen or so hot maid roles ending in the mid-90s. Beth Gondek as Jess. She was also Candy Barr in Screwballs 2, so you get the idea about Beth. So great casting with unknowns. Back to the flick. You know what makes this movie so believable is A, the jealous, jilted boyfriend things, because guys do kill their girlfriends every day of the week. The prisons are full of those guys. And B, the idea that if you're slutty in high school, you deserve whatever you get. That's the idea that's often reinforced by parents. Well, of course he set her on fire. She was boinking another dude, you know? And even the premise of this movie is that Mary Lou is evil. You know, she's dead, but she's evil because it was her own slutty behavior that got her French fried in the first place. So it's a slut-shaming script. You know how they say that now? You are slut-shaming. So let's not slut-shame Mary Lou. She's just hormonal, all right? Live and let live. What's the opposite of slut-shaming? Slut-celebrating, you know? Let's celebrate slutdom, okay? I want to be politically correct, you know? Hooray for sluts!
All right, next segment break, 48 minutes.
Man, we're getting into some serious Catholic horror here, but I'm not quite sure of the rules because we've got satin sheep fondling. Vicky's rocking horse gets possessed and turns all sexual, causing her to venture into the graveyard in Craig's letter jacket to find out just exactly what Mary Lou wants from her, only to be met by creepy Father Cooper, who tries to cast out a demon through some kind of long-distance teleporting exorcism rite, only it just causes his Bible to burst into flame, which I could have told him. You need to have Vicky strapped down and a crucifix shoved up against her face. But then again, you're withholding information that she probably needs. Like everything else in this movie, it's complicated. And by the way, I wanted to tell this quick story about Ron Oliver, the writer of this movie and the writer and director of the next Prom Night movie, Prom Night 3, The Last Kiss. Prom Night 3 was financed by Live Entertainment. I don't know if anybody here remembers Live. They produced and released a lot of stuff in the 80s and 90s, some theatrical releases, but mostly home video. And so Ron's ready to start filming, and to celebrate the start of filming, he has dinner at Trader Vic's in the Beverly Hilton Hotel. May it rest in peace. Beverly Hills killed the best tiki bar in town. Anyhow, he has dinner with the CEO of Live Entertainment, and that would be Jose Menendez. And coming along with Jose that night were his wife, Kitty Menendez, and his 2 sons, Eric Menendez and Lyle Menendez. And a good time was had by all. So that was on a Thursday night. Ron goes into the office on Monday morning, and he's told, there's been a murder. But Hollywood being Hollywood, the only thing that happened is production of Prom Night 3 got delayed by a whole 2 weeks. All right, back to the increasingly possessed, increasingly sexual body of Wendy Lyon, better remembered as Vicky Carpenter in Hello, Mary Lou. Ron Oliver, he's an interesting guy. When he got married, he had Udo Kier do the ceremony. Who does that? You know, that means, first of all, he was on a first-name basis with Udo Kier. And secondly, he wanted the marital words imprinted on his memory forever to be spoken through the voice of Udo Kier. Let's start with that. And then third, don't think of either a vampire, a sadist, or a monster when you think of Udo Kier. I mean, yeah, I get it. He's a cult movie nerd. You know, it's cool to have Udo Kier do your wedding. What about the marital spats later, though? You couldn't get a real priest. You had to go get a satanic German character actor. You know, it's just too much ammunition to give to your spouse.
Next segment break for prom night 2 at 1 hour, 1 minute.
I think we can safely say that Vicky has gone full bore Mary Lou Maloney at this point, and Father Cooper's theology, namely that she can't touch me because I'm a priest, has turned out to be sadly lacking. I still don't understand the I'm as guilty as you are thing, though, in the scene with Michael Ironside, because Cooper just stole Mary Lou away from Billy. He didn't really do anything to kill her. Anyway, though, I love the whole swirling blackboard drowning effect. Prom is nasty, isn't it? I mean, apart from the competition for prom queen, just the whole, do I have a date? Do you have a date? Do I have a good date? Do I want to go with that person? What if nobody asks that girl to the prom? What if nobody will go with that guy? I knew girls in high school that if a senior boy took a junior girl, or worse, a sophomore girl to the prom, they would pretty much mark that guy for death. That is something you just did not do. There's just way too much pressure at prom. Plus, you know you're going to be drunk, or we did. You know, I guess these schools that are alcohol-free and so proud of it, nobody gets drunk anymore. But we knew we were going to be out all night. We knew we were probably going to do something stupid. And let me repeat that. We knew we were going to do something stupid in advance. It's not like we discovered it later, including things that might get us arrested. And then when we ended up fulfilling all our prophecies, we would have to lie to our parents, lie to the teachers, lie to the police officer who thinks we should go to jail, but since it's prom night and he remembers his prom night, he pretends to believe our lies. So,
me, Chad, I never went to prom, never went to homecoming, never did any of the school dances, anything like that, never had a date. So me, never went to prom, experienced that, never went to homecoming, didn't experience that, and school dances, didn't do that either.
very stupid tradition, right? Darcy, come on over here. Who did you go to prom with?
I didn't go to prom. I didn't go to high school, so I missed out.
Well, you didn't miss anything.
I mean, you still totally feel like you do. Everyone talks about prom all the time.
So you missed your senior year? And
I missed all of high school.
Oh, and yet Hello, Mary Lou is a high school movie. That's one of your favorite movies.
That's how I imagine high school is really like.
Well, if we had a prom, I would make sure you were the prom queen.
Aww, thank you.
You could dress up like Marilyn Maloney, and that'd be one of your most badass cosplays yet. Or, you know, you could dress up like Vicky Carpenter.
I don't like Vicky. I like Mary Lou.
Okay, all right, good thing. You did not go to high school.
Darcy is a Mary Lou kind of girl.
Let's do a prom. Yeah.
Can we really do a prom?
Yeah, why not? Back to the movie about what happens when you incinerate a prom queen before she's been properly crowned. Roll it. We'll talk about this. We should have a prom. That would be a fitting conclusion to the first Last Drive-In series, a nerd prom. And we'll crown Darcy, and I promise not to set you on fire, because the Shutter insurance doesn't cover that. But and we can't afford a fire suit anyway. But we'll slow dance. No. We can slow dance to Ricky Nelson, and that'll cause you to go insane and start breaking stuff. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Let's do it.
Hey, Yuki, what time does the party store close?
I'm on it.
What?
Next segment break for prom night 2 at 1 hour, 15 minutes.
So Vicky, or Mary Lou in the body of Vicky, is pretty much having sex with and or maiming every member of the cast, including her male rocking horse and her mama, although she spares her French kissable daddy. This series of scenes, all featuring Wendy Lyon, constitutes one of the greatest horror sequences ever put together, including one of the greatest kill scenes when Monica gets crushed to death in the locker, thanks to a demonic rendering of some Little Richard lyrics. The decision to go full frontal nude with Vicky Lou, or whatever she's supposed to be right now, was made on the set at the last minute. They just decided it was more in keeping with the character for her to let it all show while she stalks Monica to her sexy demise. The part I don't understand is when Billy, the principal, goes to Mary Lou's grave and he finds Father Cooper in there, and he calls him a stupid bastard, but then he hugs him. What is that all about? Was there hugging going on previously between the two co-conspirators from 1957? Intricate backstory on this baby. Okay, we haven't talked about Michael Ironside. He's obviously the name in this movie. He would have been 37 years old when this came out. So he's not really old enough to be believable as somebody who was in high school in 1957. So he's 37, he's playing 48, but he pulls it off. Michael Ironside's breakthrough role was David Cronenberg's Scanners in 1981. He was the main bad guy. He's almost always the main bad guy, partly because of that scar down the left side of his face. He's probably best known as Evil Richter in Total Recall and the rugged drill instructor type guy in Starship Troopers. But he's had many guest shots on TV. He's been in a lot of video games. He would have been an athlete, but he ruined his knees playing football. But he's a big wrestling fan. He's friends with Jerry Lawler, the Memphis wrestler. And is Jerry still wrestling? Is he still wrestling? He's been wrestling for like 9 decades. Does anybody remember when Tiny Tim was in a wrestling promotion with Jerry Lawler?
Jerry Lawler stopped wrestling a long time ago, became a commentator for WWE in the 90s, and ever since then, he's remained as a commentator pretty much.
And Jerry Lawler broke his ukulele? Well, I just remembered that. Okay, before we get to the wild conclusion of Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2, I have bad news, Darcy. They're telling me that we cannot do the Ricky Nelson version of Hello, Mary Lou for the last drive-in prom.
Yeah, we can't do that.
That's okay.
Because it costs $22,000. Is that right, Austin? It costs $22,000?
Yep.
If I started singing it right now, would it cost $22,000?
Don't.
$22,000
what if
just
I
to
started
play the
singing
song,
Gene
chat.
Pitney version? Gene Pitney wrote it.
Same thing. Don't do it.
Or the version by the Seekers. I'll do the version by the Seekers.
It's the same song.
Why is it $22,000? I could do the Led Zeppelin version. That would actually have been my choice, or the Creedence Clearwater Revival version, or the Statler Brothers version, or the New Riders of the Purple Sage version. If I hit on one that you think I can do, just let me know. Or the one that Queen did. Oh, Queen did it as a tribute to Ricky Nelson after his DC-3 went down in the woods outside DeKalb, Texas. I bet you Queen didn't pay $22,000.
Dude, we seriously don't need it. It's fine.
We can't even do the Petula Clark version in French.
No.
That's a thing. Petula Clark covered it in French. All right, well, we're going to have to scotch tape and bubble gum this thing together. It might get ugly. John, did you bring your guitar?
It's surgically attached to my body, Joe Bob.
Okay, John, we're gonna have to use the John Brennan public domain songbook for this. You know, John, start writing something that doesn't cost $22,000. Okay, one segment left in the whole last drive-in season. This is it. You know, back to the conclusion of Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. You know, when we showed Madman, remember when we did that? We didn't pay Madman $22,000, and we sang the whole damn Madman theme song.
Yeah, that was Madman.
Well, I don't care. You know, it's only, but, you know, besides that, it's only $22,000. What is $22,000 to a big company like Shudder?
Don't do it.
John, can you give me a hello?
God.
Hello.
No, God. God.
One segment break left. Prom Night 2. Next segment break after the end credits.
And so the Mary Lou demon now lives inside the body of Michael Ironside, a setup for a sequel that couldn't ultimately be used because obviously Michael Ironside was not coming back for Prom Night 3. Great special effects sequence in the prom scene, though, that doesn't really get the credit it deserves. Josh's eyeballs irradiated as his face turns into a mass of goo. The slime creature that comes out of Vicky's bullet wound as a prom queen zombie with pus wounds and mind control powers that allow her to zap people and burst neon and wrap ropes around Craig's legs and make faces that cause inanimate objects to fly through the air as projectile weapons. And then the exploding grave, which I'm not sure why they did that because that's where Father Cooper is, not Mary Lou. Anyhow, one of the greatest horror movies ever made in Edmonton, Alberta, with 9 characters named after horror directors. The ones I hadn't mentioned yet are Mr. Craven, Mr. O'Bannon, Mr. King, Mr. Romero, and Matthew Dante. And it also features what at the time was the longest human burn in cinema history. The stunt woman who doubled for Mary Lou in that opening scene was in that fire suit for 6 seconds. And by the way, I've been talking about Ron Oliver, the screenwriter. That's him in the prom scene right after Kelly Henenlotter gives oral sex to Josh, but she does not become prom queen. Ron is the guy who says, "Hey, Kelly, how'd you blow it?" So Ron was asked to reshoot some scenes after the movie was complete. The rocking horse scene, the blackboard scene, the volleyball net that becomes a spider web, and 1 or 2 others. And he was working with Jim Doyle, who had done physical effects on Nightmare on Elm Street. And so he got Wes Craven's phone number and decided to call him up for advice. And Wes told him, "You're making a horror movie, son. Give him a scare, give him a hard-on, send him home." Which is my motto, and our motto here, right? But now it's time for the 2019 graduating class of the Last Drive-In to gather in remembrance of all that this experience has meant to us this year. It's time for the ultimate prom night with the ultimate prom queen. Are you ready, John?
I'm tuning up the band right now.
Are you ready, Darcy?
I hope you like my dress, Mr. Joe Bob.
The ultimate prom queen.
Are the seniors
the lovely Darcy the mail girl.
You minute now, Joe Bob.
I think so.
We're getting a prom night here on the Last Drive-In.
Each year, we select the girl who best exemplifies the drive-in spirit and makes her life into one continuous horror movie. And this year, the votes were unanimous, and the 2019 Last Drive-In Prom Queen is Darcy the Mail Girl!
The Last Drive-In Prom Queen is the lovely Darcy.
Speech!
I've had sinful relations with boys, many times, and I love every minute of it.
Hit it, John!
Hello, Mary Lou. It's prom night too. All I wanna do is dance with you.
I wish YouTube could see the smile on my face right now. We're getting a prom night on the Last Drive-In.
All I wanna do is dance with you. I said you got a nice dress, but your hair's a mess. And now that poor Vicky girl is so
Come on, Bob. Get like that monitor. Come on out here.
Joe Bob, the prom king, the lovely Darcy, the mail girl, is the ultimate prom queen. Everybody's dancing on set.
Come on, Mary Lou, it's prom night. All I wanna do is dance with you. I said you got a nice dress.
Come on out, you can. Come on.
And now that poor Vicky girl is so possessed. All alone, Mary Lou, it's prom night too. All I wanna do is dance with you. I said you got nice breasts, but your face is a mess. And now that poor Vicky girl is so possessed.
Honey, this is the talking verse in this song where I tell you that I love you my whole life long. Darling, the prom was a magical day. You're my girl and it'll always be that way. Before we say farewell on this magical night, we'll go to the diner and give them a fright. And then when it's time to say adieu, I'm the luckiest man because I got to dance with you. Okay, John, bring it low. As we say goodbye, we don't say farewell because we will all carry the Last Drive-In our hearts. And now I would just like to say, at the end of this season of Last Drive-In, as we all go out into the world, your lives are spread out before you like dead geese in a rice paddy. You're now fully equipped to take life by the balls and annoy Netflix and Disney and Amazon and all those other services. Because where did you learn to slow dance with a demon girl? You learned it here on Last Drive-In. So let your spirit fly. We can do anything now. Well, I can't because I wrote this bit and we're dying here. But all of you can sail into the future like the albatross in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, keeping the legacy of Ricky Nelson alive, even though he ended up mangled in a ditch in DeKalb, Texas, while Petula Clark covered his song in French. Thank you, Drive-In family.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Austin,
Thank you,
Darcy, Justin, Matt, Jordan, Bob, Marcus, Crystal, Deja, Yuki, Jay, Kevin, Travis, Paul, Sam, Wally, John, and of course John Brennan and the Big Thief. Thank you, John. Thank you, Shutter. Thank you, Felissa, wherever you are. Okay, John. Thank you. Good job, John. John, there's only so much of that Frankie Valley stuff we can take, all right? Okay, John, it was funny on Legend of Boggy Creek, but it was even funny when we sang the Badman theme together. But this is just self-indulgent, John. Okay, see you later, alligator. And that's it, John. That's it, John. You gotta stop now, John. Stop. Always remember, the drive-in will never die.
The drive-in will never die.
The drive-in will never die.
Raise your right hand.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for spending tonight with me. Spooky season is around the corner, September 1st here in Buffalo, New York, and all around the world. Thank you to our new subscribers. Thank you, Shutter Network, for letting us experience the Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. Thank you, Joe Bob Briggs and Darcy the Mail Girl. Thank you to all the Last Drive-In family and people who love going to the drive-in. Thank you so much for letting me experience season 4 with you. Ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. This was the finale to season 4 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. And next time we see Joe Bob, it will be season 5. Thank you once again. And until next time, peace, God. The drive-in will never die. Horror will never die.